All right. Good evening, fight fans, film fans, and fight film fans. My name is Thinker St. James. This is MMA on Film. I am joined by my good friend Chase Parton, and tonight it brings us great pleasure to present to you our review of episodes 1 and 2 of McGregor Forever. Chase, how are you?
I'm very, very good. This is very exciting. Obviously, the Conor McGregor fight, the return is, in a matter of no time coming up. So we're excited to break this one down. I'm very hyped for this, guys. I tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was one that we had discussed reviewing for a little while, even regardless of the return. So obviously, this worked out very well with the return being very soon. So we're doing episodes 1 and 2 tonight. We will do episodes 3 and 4 next week, combine those all together at some point down the road. But that being said, Chase, I mean, coming into this thing, this is, of course, McGregor Forever. This is a 2023 docuseries that is in 4 parts from Netflix following the life and career of Conor McGregor. What did you know about this series coming into this review?
Coming into this review, and I'm glad you started it this way because I want to ask you the exact same thing. Coming into this review specifically, I had seen this documentary. I had already seen this years when it came out, years ago now, 3 years. It's crazy to think about. This came out and I watched it immediately because Conor McGregor, like a lot of people, is somebody that I look, in MMA, obviously, this is somebody that I watched a lot of highlights and stuff, and I knew who he was, and I wanted to figure more things out about him. So I knew about everything coming into this, and I'm very excited to rehash it. So, Thinker, what did you know about this?
I knew that it came out. That's what I knew about it, basically. Now, see, this is, I think, really why this is going to be a very interesting dichotomy between our two perspectives is, having followed the sport for a good time longer than you've been in it, I've, kind of lived through a lot of this with Conor McGregor. And I didn't seem like anything in this that like called out to me to like sit down and watch it. I saw some pictures that circulated from it when it came out. By 2023, I certainly didn't need this level of an in-depth look at his life, mostly because I had also sort of heard through the grapevine that there wasn't that it was kind of a surface level view of it, even if it is like embedded with him. Like, you have cameras following him around and seeing his life from a more intimate perspective. But that was basically the perspective that I had. I didn't seek it out. So this was my first time watching it.
I think that's an interesting thing to bring up is, you were not inclined to watch this. Well, at a time, in 2023, as we obviously will talk about more with the documentary, there's was a time with media just not having anything coming out. If you were a sports fan, you would watch these sports docuseries style things. It started with the Michael Jordan Last Dance, back when that dropped, everybody was on that. It was like one of Netflix's highest watched things because COVID had just, the pandemic just hit, the shutdown had begun. And so this, obviously years later at that point, but it was still in the midst of we didn't have much to go off of. And Conor McGregor obviously didn't need a lapse in media to steal the show or whatever. But for me, I watched it because I was a Conor McGregor fan. Also, I can see how people would turn this on because there was nothing else going on. It's like, okay, oh, here's something, that's not necessarily being filmed right now, but it is a film coming out that was filmed a while ago kind of deal.
Well, I guess that it's really just because those types of documentaries, and of course, we'll talk about this in depth as we go through these episodes, but like if I'm not seeing that there's going to be some type of like actual like deeper focus on like the full spectrum of a person's life, like seeing training footage and that kind of stuff, like I can see that from any fighter. the story I can see from almost any fighter. Like, Conor obviously has a cult of personality and is, kind of his own ecosystem, his own world. But if you don't go deeper into it, then what do I get aside from things that I can pretty much get from anywhere else?
And we will definitely talk about the time frame of this like documentary kind of deal. It is interesting. We'll jump into it immediately, but it does not take place over the lifespan of Conor McGregor. I mean, it
Very
loosely
specific.
talks about it, you know.
Yeah, very very specific time frame, pretty much from 2021 to 2023 is the crux of everything here, with some references and video footage from other parts sprinkled throughout. That's actually one overarching note that I have for this before we get into the specifics of the episodes, is how they selectively insert that other footage from other time periods in, pretty much, I guess, to emphasize certain points. But it gets a little bit muddy at times, because you're like, is this, when is this from? Like, I understand that like what he's saying is referencing something in the timeline based on what they're presenting, but like it kind of jumps around a little bit. That gets a little disorienting at times, but we can go into those details.
We definitely will. And the last thing that I would say is it is kind of a weird dichotomy here. You know, you are a longer term fan than me, and you did not see this. I am not necessarily the longer tenured fan. I had seen this. You know, I'm very familiar with this. You know, and I actually think it's very, very. You know, we'll talk about it, of course.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I think it's what you and I had kind of talked about privately when we were talking about doing this series, is that we're both, regardless of how long you've been a fan of the sport, we're both familiar with most of the story here. I mean,
yeah,
obviously, if you're a fan of this sport, Conor is omnipresent. All of the details of Conor's life and career and trials and tribulations, all of that is public information that is very central to the MMA narrative as a whole, in addition to being his personal story. So whether you want to sit down and watch it presented in this way or just get it via being a member of the community, it's inescapable.
absolutely. And if that's the last thing on my mind, is there anything else you want to say before we take a brief break? Shout out the chat before we start. You know, everybody did come in hot here. I appreciate Sam being first. Nobody's going to take that away from you, brother. Mank, Meat Rocket. Meat Rocket, no, we are not showing the film. I don't know if anybody else needed to know. We're not showing the film. Carlos, good night, brother. Appreciate you.
Appreciate all you guys. Thank you very much for hanging out with us for this one as we go through episode 1 and 2 here. Of course, we are starting off with episode 1, that is entitled Bad Blood, and it is July of 2021. We open with Conor in a hospital bed here. This is after the Poirier 3 ankle break, and apparently Mystic Mac predicted this break too, in addition to everything else he predicts.
Well, and this is again where it starts. This is how interesting it starts. It's like you would think, okay, the Conor McGregor documentary, where's this story gonna start? Right after he gets his leg broken in half. You know, it's like that is an interesting point for this story to start necessarily, because, you know, people who know of Conor McGregor, you know, they know about what he's done, you know, a lot of things with his legacy. I don't know if the casual fan jumped into this and they're like, oh yeah, that's right, he did break his leg kind of deal. So it was interesting, you
I
know.
mean, it would have been pretty close to when this came out, I would suspect, or at least somewhere around, relatively quickly after that. So, I mean, it probably was pretty fresh in most people's minds, I would suspect. But either way, really what it shows to me with that starting everything is what you're going to see a lot throughout this series is basically this push and pull of Conor being the cult of personality, the figure in the sport, this larger than life, athlete that commands a presence and everybody has a great adoration for, but is constantly having this push and pull internally between, having to overcome adversity and then, and then doing that and then winning. It's the cycle that he's constantly going through.
I think when you're also watching this scene, you know, it opens with the leg break and he's talking about it. It's showing clips of him after the leg break, and he's talking about how, you know, he thought his career was over at this point. You know, when
Right.
it happened, this was the end. You know, so he was frustrated, lashing out, and actually, this is where you start to see whoever his you know, cameraman is or whatever. You know, they caught some really good angles because, you know, the body language of Connor. You know, they catch a lot of good angles of where, you know, you can see like it's a depleted frustrated frustration. Like I was frustrated and it's like now I'm sitting in my frustration, like now what kind of deal, you know? So I thought that was good.
There is one very specific incident. I believe it's in this episode. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. I'll talk about it when we get to that. But where you get these kind of more human sides of Connor, which is interesting because really, I would say if there's any thing so far in the series that was interesting to me is seeing a little bit more of that side of Connor because forward facing, this is a person who really does not show any signs of weakness, really. I mean, like, we see it in the cage, we see it in his fighting at times or whatever, but like, from a mental fortitude standpoint, this is one of the most confident human beings on planet Earth, and he really never breaks that. So to be able to see small portions of that was certainly interesting in this documentary.
Yeah, he was breaking kayfabe in this one, guys. He definitely let the curtain down.
Yeah, yeah, to an extent. I mean, and look, he'll talk. The big theme of this is mental, just overcoming mental adversity. Being disciplined mentally. Like we'll see this as a recurring theme in this. So to actually see the downside of that and the cycle that he is constantly going through, even still to this day, at times it seems, is very interesting to get that side of the perspective.
Absolutely. And then and then he drops the title card, or he drops the name of the series. He goes, but don't forget, McGregor Forever kind of deal. He obviously is a Chad, so he makes his own history. And then they do this thing intermittently through the show. I don't know if I love it, but it was okay just to kind of progress through the narrative where they would splice in all social media people, podcasters talking,
Yeah,
Ariel and this and that. So
I had it as ethereal media voiceovers obviously didn't get the memo because they think it's over. And of course, come on, people, it's McGregor Forever. It's definitely not over.
absolutely, the way that I put it is, and splice in the haters.
You're right.
That's the
Yeah.
way.
And you're certainly right. That is something that will happen. It uses, I think it's an okay framing device because it basically is giving you the conversation outside of his bubble. It's like what the rest of the world is saying. But on the same hand, that's not the whole conversation, right? I mean, of course, there are still people out there. They're huge Connor, army, so to speak, of people who were never going to believe that to be the reality of it. This is just what a certain select group of the media is saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so after we get this thing, and I'm trying to, the way that I'm like wrapping my head around it, like when I'm looking at this is like, as a filmmaker, obviously I'm not one, but when it comes to them throwing in these portions where it's just, okay, throw in the social media ramble, and then they just start a whole new thing. It's like, well, they just kind of use that as like, you're just supposed to forget about kind of what we were talking about for a second, and we'll move on, but we'll come back to it, but we'll move on to
Well, yeah,
something.
I think it's kind of baiting the hook to be like, oh, okay, we're starting off at an adverse time in his life, obviously a pretty traumatic one with the leg break. You hear the conversations that's going on, but let's bring it back into like, the reason why this is who this person is and like what you should be knowing and like why you should know that this is going to be, a triumphant story in the big picture. Because we get the intro montage and title sequence, and it's cutting between old footage of like babyface young Connor, where I'm an MMA fighter with a 4-1 record, the Cage Warriors days, and all of that. And I'm like, these Netflix documentaries, having seen a couple of other ones, are slightly formulaic, I would say, because like basically what I just outlined, that's not uncommon for this type of documentary or Netflix or whatever, but it is effective because, what I just outlined, that does give you a narrative to latch onto.
No, absolutely. I love this one. Yes. So you see young Connor sit down. He says 4-1 is the record. And I'm like, damn, that is how far back the footage goes. Think about how long of the career Connor's had. Not just how many fights, but how many years in martial arts. He's been training with world class athletes and doing substances, whatever you want to say. But he's been doing this a long time kind of deal, and I really appreciate this little montage intro. It shows his UFC debut KO. We'll obviously come back to this a little later. And then it drops him, we're not here to take part, we're here to take over. That was obviously iconic. Beating up Mendez, beating Dustin, punking out Aldo, not even just beating Aldo, but like I'm pretty sure they showed a clip of him beating him and then like punking him out later. It was like what is even going on? So this was good. Beating Alvarez, getting the second belt, and then there was a specific question. What challenges you now? What that was, and that's actually key going forward. If you remember that later, what challenges Connor now, and obviously we'll continue on. And then and this is actually, I'm actually really glad that this is the point where I can ask you. This is a point with the documentary starting after the Floyd stuff, because we talk about, there's two names right now, two most famous men in combat sports, Connor, Floyd, the most famous Irishman, and then they dropped the McGregor Forever thing again. But that is something that I wanted to come to specifically is this is after that portion. You would think a McGregor documentary, well, they're going to talk about the most money that he ever made in a boxing match, surely, right? Not much.
Yeah, this really does come from a pretty strict MMA perspective. Obviously, touches on the Maymac fight, touches on the amount of money, just the fact that there was a large amount of money there. I think they referenced the 100 million at some point in there. But either way, it really is kind of primarily focused on the MMA side of his life, outside of that, because I guess it was sort of a blip, even if it like I know it's crazy to say that, right? The Maymac fight, the biggest fight of all time, is a blip on the radar. But like in the whole grand narrative of Conor's life, while it was the most money that he probably will ever make in his life, in the full timeline, if you're going from the very very beginning all the way in through all of the things we're going to talk about, and then now into his life currently, it is just that portion of 2017 that is, of course, it's a huge part. It's a beacon of his life story, but in the whole timeline, it is just one portion.
And to that point, what I will say, I am very, very happy that that is how it played out, because very well could we have had a documentary that talks about his boxing with Floyd, and I would not have given a shit. Thankfully, it was about MMA, but more importantly, thankfully, Conor took his career and navigated it past boxing. He went into boxing probably more or less to try to bait Floyd and to go to MMA so he can whoop him there, kind of deal. But he didn't lose badly. Arguably, people want to say he got robbed. I don't know. Floyd is not, different story. But thankfully, Conor said boxing is just the path for me to go make $100 million and more. And then MMA is my true love. I will always come back to this. And I'm thankfully the Conor McGregor that we see today is coming back to mixed martial arts, and he's not going off to be a boxer, like that. Let's be thankful there, everybody.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that of the way that the career trajectory could have worked out, this was certainly the best path when it comes to him in the fighting capacity. However, this is also a big sticking point for me when it comes to this documentary, not the Maymac fight portion, because I agree, if they had gotten bogged down into the weeds of that, it would have definitely bogged everything down and slowed everything to a grinding pace, and it would not have been good. But if this is supposed to be a probing look at this man's life, you cannot do a documentary of this size and scope and scale and not reference the sexual assault case. I'm this is going to just be a kind of a recurring point throughout all of this, but
They
I mean,
reference it.
they not in any kind in
I
any of
mean,
these
they say
episodes.
court cases. He's got court.
They're talking about the stuff that we're going to be talking about later with the Beeb. They're not talking about that.
No, they definitely brought up. I'm pretty sure they said something, but we'll get into
I
it.
mean,
But
and if okay, fair enough. Like again, if we're having that portion of the conversation where we're having to figure it out, then it's not enough, because I
I
mean,
know
it's
it wasn't yet. Let me just say it that way. We have not got to a portion yet where at least I believe that I remember something about what you're referencing. So,
okay, fair enough. Well,
but I agree.
yeah, throughout, I'm just saying that my feeling, and I think a big reason why I never sought this documentary out in the first place is because I'm like, if it is coming from a perspective that is being, and I saw that his manager is a executive producer on this. This feels a little fluffy, is all I'm saying. You know what I mean? And so it's like, yeah, obviously with a guy like this, you have to say things like, oh, he overcomes adversity, and yeah, he gets himself into trouble, but he builds himself back up. Like we'll go through all of that, but like to leave out such major portions like that intentionally, it would feel that to me is a little bit of a problem if we're supposed to be getting the full picture of who this guy is.
Absolutely.
Did I lose you, Chase?
I get you. I'm hearing you.
Okay.
We're like a little out of sync here, right? You're good?
Yeah. I think we desynced for just a moment here. Hopefully that'll catch back up.
Okay, so this is where we actually learn the title of the show, or the episode. Think or spoiled it for you guys, but it is called Bad Blood. That is the first episode. So obviously you kind of know where this is going. Actually, really you don't, because again, if it's after, Floyd, yeah, sure, but if they're bouncing around, this could have went, they could have went back to a Diaz situation. You don't know where because of how much they're bouncing around. They could have started with something like that. I'm actually surprised they kind of didn't have a Diaz callback when it comes to this episode specifically, because even I even think later in the episode he says something like, I've never lost in the UFC, and I'm like, hold on, brother, you got fucking choked out. Like, what are we talking about? So maybe it was a clip from before then, but I think they were missing a crucial point. Like this would actually maybe Diaz nobody co-signed to be in it kind of deal. I don't know,
Could
but
be. Yeah, you are right about that. And they again, that goes back to them using clips to like illustrate other things, but like they don't necessarily line up. So it kind of gives you this hodgepodgey sort of impression of where you are in the timeline.
yeah, absolutely. But where we are in the timeline is 11 months after Floyd Mayweather's fight with him. We are in Dublin, Ireland, and he's playing with Conor Jr. And I'm not gonna lie.
No, well,
Go
I was
ahead.
just
What
gonna
were you gonna
say,
say?
we are there. That is absolutely true. We start off on a shot of his house, and I don't know if this is just a European thing, but did you notice like the roofs are a little bit strange? The house is like two big arrows that are going upwards, and the roofs come out very far. It's just an odd looking structure of this house. Again, like I said, maybe a European thing,
Guys,
and I'm getting a little in the weeds, but it just it was just something noticeable to me.
what I was gonna say to this is you act like you know rich people's building
True.
structures. I don't know. This dude is uber rich. That's probably a super sturdy roof or
You,
something.
you can't buy
That's
taste, I
come on.
guess.
That is true. But no, so you get to this scene. Obviously, he's in his fucking mansion,
Yeah.
and he's playing with Connor Jr., and this, as a person who's able, and obviously, thinker, when it comes to what you're talking about with the court cases, we'll talk about some stuff later. But when it comes to the art and the artist, I can look at this scene and I'm like, man, Connor's happy playing with with his family. He's happy being a family man. I don't have to be, carrying a weight of like all that stuff. Like I get it. I understand it's horrible and we should not be, but the documentary, it was made. I can only
Well,
watch it,
and I
like,
think that that is another interesting element of where both of us come from with these things, because like as someone who will always have that sort, especially for the fact that I covered it so much and I'm just so aware of all the
yeah,
details of it, it always is kind of a little nagging point with me, because yeah, I mean, he's with his young son. It's an infant child at this point, and you can obviously see that the familial bond is very strong there, but I had in the notes, it said family man Connor always makes me feel weird and sad knowing the other side. So it's just tough. I mean, and again, I don't necessarily like I want to feel better for, especially from the child side of everything, because they're innocent in all of this. So it's like I hate that that's the case there, but it's hard for me to separate the art from the artist.
I can understand that portion as well. What I will also say is I am able, at least to an extent, as I get older, family, when it starts delving into my own kind of deal. Right now, I'm able to watch this, and it's like, yeah, I'm trying to think wherever I was going with it, but this is fine for me because I'm not thinking about the kids' lives afterwards. It's like, okay, they're showing me the kid
Mhm.
happy. The kid's happy with
Right.
dad, like that is what I'm told here. I'm following the narrative to that extent, kind of deal. I'm not like thinking like, man, what is how does that kid smile after he gets off the camera?
Right.
I don't know. So this one right here, all well for me. Him driving, the motorized car around with Connor Jr. Like that was a pretty fun part. Him hitting the bag with Connor Jr. Go champ,
Well,
go
yeah,
champ.
the little Lambo toy car was one of the things that was circulating online after this came out, because of course that is the infamous Aldo 13S license plate on that thing, which is celebrating the 13-second knockout of Jose Aldo, which I always thought was pretty funny and a very petty detail from Conor McGregor.
That is pretty funny that Connor Jr. is just rolling around with the 13S license plate, but nonetheless. So obviously we get shots of Connor and D. What's her name?
Yep,
D.
D
Devlin or something.
Devlin. That is the at the time. Right.
Fiance at the
Long time
time.
fiance, of
Yes.
course. This was still in the fiance period, with which just recently ended. I mean, last year was when they finally tied the knot. Um, what I say about Dee in this, at least in this episode, she gets a little bit more time to open up a little bit in the next episode, but like she's just as much NPC here as she is, always in his life. I mean, like she doesn't it never feels like Dee has a lot of agency, is what I would say. And I'm not trying to be rude to her, because I think that it is a great attribute for a woman to stand by her man like she has throughout everything in his life. She was there before he had anything. So she is really connected to him as a person. Really, does the money is secondary. It would really seem, and that's a beautiful thing, and something that should be cherished, of course, by Conor. It's just an interesting dynamic that she is just kind of the sidekick.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm on it. But no, so and then as you see, Connor and D, hanging around, then you start getting some over what the hell am I talking
The
about? Some
voiceovers, yeah.
voiceover from the
Hmm.
coach. What was the coach's name
Owen
for this one?
Roddy is his striking coach.
Is it not Rhodey?
Roddy, I believe, but Roddy
Okay.
might be an Irish
Okay. Either way,
pronunciation, perhaps.
copy that. So either way, yes, so he's talking about where Connor grew up, Dublin 12, which was a small suburb, talks about the hardship with the Irish mentality being trade work. When you're done with school, go get a trade, and that's your life. Don't really have many dreams of doing anything else. Like that was another key thing that he said about that. Connor was, I maybe it was, did Connor jump in here and he said this portion right here? Maybe it was still the coach, but it was something about, your dreams die after school. It's just the trade work. And I was like, damn, that kind of does suck, that's like the stereotype that you kind of
Yeah, yeah,
carry,
yeah. He's saying, because this is the estate they call it, Crumlin Dublin 12, which is essentially Irish housing projects, and that 95% of people who grow up there basically stay there. Getting out of it is doing better than 95% of the people. And the real stress, Connor, this is Connor speaking at this point. He says, the stress in the fight of Dublin 12 was the mortgage. It's the tough
Mm.
times when you're broke in this area, and yeah, that's that really is something that you can never take away from Connor's story. This really is a guy who came from the lowest that you can in Ireland, and made his way based on his abilities as a fighter and his commitment to it and all of those things. So this framework does ring true.
And so this next portion of the story, I feel like doesn't get talked about enough. Where Connor was a plumber. After he realized that trade work is where it is. He became a plumber for 18 months, and I think this is a portion of the story that doesn't get talked about enough, because how many jobs you guys have quit or wanted to quit. 18 months is a long ass fucking time. To do trade work. Being a plumber, obviously, the job itself, I wouldn't personally do it. It may not be as hard as it looks, I don't know, or maybe it is. But the point is it that should be talked about a lot. Like, that is a hard working job for, a blue collar guy kind of deal. So the fact that it was 18 months, people need to be like, yo, he really was out there doing his thing. If it was fucking 2 months, it's like, okay, he wasn't really doing shit. He learned and then he quit. But he was on the job doing his thing for a year and a half or whatever. So shout out Connor. I think in this portion, I really think people don't, they see what he is now, but they don't really understand kind of where he came from, and I think that should be talked
Yeah,
about more.
absolutely. I mean, that is a commitment. I often wonder if Connor still gets under the sink to fix it himself, just having that background now. Just out of knowing. I mean, like, I'm sure it doesn't necessarily leave you 100%, and that is really a connection to his roots. If he would do something like that, just I mean, not the obviously he does not have to, but just like
Yeah.
out of that understanding, because I mean, this is we'll talk in the next episode. Just I won't give away too much about it, but he's going to talk about giving back to the community later on, and like things like that. It's like, there those are the things that connect you to where you came from. And I think that knowing what we know about Connor and his life, that sometimes maybe that's good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And so after he became a plumber, 18 months later, he started training. He quit being a plumber and he started training. And in Ireland, nobody knows what MMA is. But he always knew this was the thing. And this, obviously continues on through the entire story. He told himself that he was always going to be, the next MMA guy. And I don't necessarily think always is the right terminology, because he started training at a certain age kind of deal. I don't know if it was like a young age, but like it wasn't necessarily enough time for you to be like, I always wanted to do this. He probably had other things on his mind, but that's just a nitpick here to the story. But the point is, he had always known MMA was going to be his way out of
Yeah, well, I
Ireland.
mean, because that's an interesting element of all of this where it's like no one knew what MMA was in the country, right? And it's like that's somewhat real, but there had to have been some scene for Connor to even be able to get into it. And I did a little bit of research on this, and I said, who were the other major MMA fighters pre Connor? There was Tom Egan, Joe Duffy, who he ended up fighting, of course, that was his loss, and Cathal Pendred and Patty Holohan. So basically, not many, but there was a little, very small scene. They do reference that being the scene very small there. So really, I mean, Connor does get a lot of credit for not only being one of the biggest figures in all of the sport history, but also for really blowing it up in the country to an extent.
I'm gonna spoil it for later when he shows up, but I think also, you're looking at the Irish fighters. I don't know if necessarily that would have been his way in, was following in the footsteps of them. Obviously he was, but they show Gunnar Nelson later.
Yes.
That could have been, his kind of, if Gunner's been doing it as long as what I'm heard, he could probably have been his kind of not mentor, but cousin in the
Yeah, well, I mean,
sense kind of deal.
SBG was already there when he joined it, so it's not like he founded that gym or anything. So there had to have been some
Yeah.
basis for it. And he talks about going to boxing gyms too. So I'm sure, like by osmosis over time, he, found out that this was a thing, obviously. But like really to think about where it was before Connor and then where it is now in the country, it's night and day difference, obviously.
A- Absolutely. And so the next scene, we jump. We jump after that. We get to a gender reveal party. Connor is, having a good time. They're figuring out how to pop the balloons real quick. Junior's just running around, champ, and they pop the balloon. And what do you guys know? It's going to be a girl. Happy day. We get to see again Connor happy. The thing that it looks like he's happiest with is his family. I've seen Connor win fights, but I don't think I've seen him look like that kind of deal. There's a different type of love.
For sure. And yet another time where I had in the notes, the accusations quietly lingering over a now a father-daughter relationship does not sit well with me, but it is what it is.
And so, family is Connor's passion, is what I wrote here. Oh, I also wrote the name would be Connorella. There you go.
Connorella, love it.
Um, And then and then I think it might have been the coach who came over top again. Connor has it all and he still wants to prove something, So that was key. Another thing that obviously continues on through the
Sure.
story. He's never gonna shy away from a fight. And then this is where we get our bad blood situation. So I had talked previously about, why I believe that Dustin Poirier is one of Conor McGregor's best friends is because he gets a fucking cool title card and a whole episode. I'm telling you, the title card is not as cool as what you're going to see later. So we get the title card for Habib the Eagle Nurmagomedov, and it is pretty sick. I'm not going to lie. So you get to see or you get to hear Ariel. Ariel comes on, guys, and he's going to talk about Habib. He's going to talk about how dominant Habib was. They're also going to show the old picture of Connor and Habib, and they're going to talk about this picture was just random, like they didn't even know who each other were, or even care kind of deal. So it's just funny how things kind of pan out after that
Yeah.
picture.
So yeah, I mean,
And
get
yeah, go
that
ahead.
you get that footage. I thought it was kind of funny that the first thing that they show of Habib was him landing a punch, considering what he normally does in fights. But that was yeah. So that was that. But yeah, Ariel makes a great point in the voiceover that he does about Habib. It's not only that Habib comes in 16-0. It's just that he never stopped winning and he never lost rounds. I mean, like this is a person that like people forget how dominant he was in his time, regardless of whether it was padded or not, or all the things that people now talk about with Habib being that time moves on and the nature of the sport changes. But at this point in time, I mean, this was an unstoppable figure in this sport, and it really should be remembered and respected as such.
Absolutely. And I actually think this is another crucial point. You talk about, the court cases and certain things. They explicitly leave out a lot of stuff about these main characters. If Habib is one of the main characters, they left out a lot of shit about him. At the end of this episode, we will talk. They just fuck him off. Like they don't even
Yeah,
give a shit about what his portion of the
because it's
context is.
McGregor forever. It's not Habib forever.
It's not McGregor court cases
Yeah,
forever,
exactly.
like so. But either way, even if it is, but Dana White comes on and he's talking about, the fighters are unique people. It is about respect at the end of the day. Some guys, if you tick them off, they don't let that shit go, kind of deal. So he tells the story of Artem, whatever that dude's last
Artem
name is.
Lobov, of course.
Lobov, yes. Artem obviously calls Habib a pussy or something on the fucking on the radio or on a podcast, which fair play to him. That was gutsy, dude. Did I don't think he was gonna win the fight in the cage, but
I
ballsy.
mean,
I'll give him that.
Artem barely won any fights in the cage, so he certainly was not beating Habib. But yeah, we go through the whole inciting incident with Habib slapping Artem Lobov. Funny to think that Connor sticking up for Artem started the whole Habib beef when he and Artem would have their own falling out later over the proper 12 stuff. I mean, this is like at the time, him and Artem, teammates and very close friends, Proper 12 comes out. Artem has some claim to that. I mean, the whole court case plays out the way that it's going to play out over time. But, if it wasn't for Artem Lobov starting the whole thing with Habib, none of Habib versus Connor may have ever happened.
Yeah, that is super interesting. I know that is. I don't know. It's so funny to think about like this random guy. Connor's just he rides or die for this dude. This is Michael Aswell's Josh Fan. Like he does not play around. You touch my guy around the neck and you slap him about. He gets his. This is where they talk about. This is key. Connor gets his crew. I'm pretty sure that's how they say it. Like he gets his crew, and then they go after the bus. Connor grabs the dolly. Obviously, it's just a real it's a real clip down edited version of it. It's just Connor grabbing the dolly, throws it at the bus. Easy does it, and then we go to court. We got three counts of assault, one criminal mischief, and he pleads guilty for community service. And then he has his post court speech. I love this
Oh
one.
yeah, where he just basically is just like, yeah, thanks everybody. Really no reference to anything. That's why I say, I mean, throughout all of this here. So just going back just a couple of steps, we're leading up to the dolly throwing incident. First, I thought this had to be mentioned. Connor doing squats with his homie in a fireman's carry. I don't know if you caught this. This
I,
is
I,
yeah.
there's a lot of things that Connor does and did, wardrobe wise and or training wise. We've seen what he does on Twitter training wise. I'm not. You just got to move past. This is what rich
I
people
guess
do.
so. Yeah,
Like
not quite touch button in the park. But not too far off with that. But really, what I needed to say here mostly was this is certainly the height of untouchable Connor, and the post court speech certainly references that as well. This is like cocaine and the knowledge that he'd get a slap on the wrist. Why not throw a dolly through the window and traumatize Rose Namajunas for life? It's like there were no consequences for Connor at this time, so you get that exact speech that you're talking about. Yeah, thanks for all the support, everybody. Walk off, no questions answered.
and then this is an interesting portion of it because Ariel doesn't get enough respect at this point in his career. What do we think? He sits at a desk all day and he just talks to fighters and interviews whatever you want to say, whatever the haters would say. Ariel was on the ground for this court case. He was right outside. He interviewed Connor's manager right outside the court case, right after it. Now that is journalism right there, everybody. He was on the scene and he was equipped. He was ready to go, camera, lights, whatever. This was great. So fuck all that he even said. I don't even know, but I
Well,
loved
I
it.
mean,
It
the,
was
the
great.
the big takeaway is that Connor's manager. This is Adi Attar is his name. He's with Ariel and says Habib is the likely opponent. And what I said to that is it's like this is a good example of the organization actually being able to capitalize and make the fight that makes the most sense. We had Tony versus Habib fall through 8 million times. Of course, later on, Ilya versus Islam, Tom versus John Jones. So many fights that we were denied. At least this one got to be made when it made sense to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he does. Will the opponent likely be Habib? Yes, likely or
Right.
whatever. And this at this point, Habib is 25-0, and that's when we're gonna get him versus Connor. It's gonna be the biggest fight ever. Destiny is what Ariel says. I believe is how he words it, and I agree. This is my favorite word now. Destiny is kind of what this fight amounted to. This had to happen if the fans did not get it because people got to remember this was at a time still I don't think people really knew or gave Habib the respect that he ever really deserved kind of deal. Connor brought him to the level and him being able to actually compete with Connor. it really did end up being one of the biggest fights of all time. Like, it is
Yeah, and you can
crazy.
see and feel the difference in how people care about that fight. They're going through all those clips of like YouTubers talking about it. Oh, this is gonna be the biggest fight of all time, that kind of thing. And it's
Yep.
like you can feel the difference, I would say at least, between that and what we're getting with this upcoming fight with Max Holloway here, the rematch. Obviously, it's going to be different no matter what. Time moves on, things are different. It's always going to be different, but just the feeling in the community versus that and this now, especially also coming after the White House card too, kind of puts it in a little bit of a different perspective. So, it's interesting. Like, again, and a part of why we're reviewing this now, to see where things were at that time versus how they are now. I mean, really, you obviously people are talking about it online. This is not like everyone knows that it's happening, but there's no way that the lead up to this current fight is anywhere near the same realm as the Habib fight. It just couldn't be.
Yeah, true. I definitely agree with you. I mean, as they even explained, like in some of the portions of this, is like there's just something about drama that people drive to. If there's a feud, people relate to not liking somebody, kind of deal. Everybody has somebody they don't
Sure.
like,
And well,
kind of
and
deal.
also that this was back when Bad Blood was actually that. None of this fucking Strickland versus Chimaev bullshit. These guys actually hated each other, still hate each other to this day. So, whether or not, like, I'm not always of the mindset that makes for better fights. It makes for interesting lead ups to fights for sure. But like, there definitely is something to be said for the reality matching the reality. You know what I mean? Like, for
Yeah.
as opposed to a false front, which we certainly got in some of these other fights.
Absolutely. So we're skipping forward again. It's the UFC 25th anniversary press conference. 5 years ago was, last year, I think. I think we just had the 30th year anniversary because Diego Lopez was on that
That's
fucking
right.
card or something, whatever the hell it is. So August 2018. Oh, they just fucking told me the date. So 7 years ago, whatever, eight. I don't know how to do math. Either way, Habib and Connor trailer announcement. It is sick. It is everything that I wish we had right now for trailers. Like, think about what we get for fighter announcements. AI's fucking BS kind of
Yeah.
deal. That was some killer shit that they had back then. Back in August of 2018. I had a birthday around that time, and this announcement dropped for October 6th in Vegas. Connor versus Habib. And then cue the social media chatter again. This is great.
Yeah, just I mean, more of exactly what I was just talking about. People speculating about how big this fight was going to be, and really, I mean, you go back to that time period. It lived up to it. I mean, this certainly was that. I mean, I remember watching this fight. This was way before Yama, of course. Watching this at a party, and it was a packed party of a bunch of people who couldn't care less about the about MMA and for the most part, but Connor was the cult of personality at the height of it. So I mean, it really did draw that much interest, and it was huge. It was massive. It was as massive as advertised.
Absolutely. And then so now we go back to Dublin. 5 weeks until the fight. We get a training montage, for takedowns, of course. He's got Habib coming up, so he's training. I think he even says, or actually, so it was just a training montage here. And then we skip forward a little more to 3 weeks until the fight, correct? Is there anything in
No,
between there
well,
that I
because
missed?
I think it was the second part that you just mentioned when he brings in this Russian stand-in, this Habib stand-in guy that has the piece of gauze taped to his head. Like that was kind of a strange thing.
Yeah, I also this it was weird because I think I heard Connor say, like, no pads today. Like, we're going good. But then they clearly were wearing pads, so I was like, what did I hear? Because the way that the story ends up here, so obviously, they're talking about it's 3 weeks from the fights, and the coaches talk about, like, these are dark vibes that we got going on here. It's something bad's
They
happening, kind of
they they
deal.
reference that often throughout this series, just like ominous vibes, with good vibes, bad. Like they very much like this underlying kind of like I hesitate to say supernatural element, but it almost feels that way at times.
I listen, I am the type of person who kind of I relate to this type of stuff, when it comes to destiny, when it comes to we'll talk about Connor when he he finds, bigger things in life, this one right here, I think that is just the vibe of the club. It's like this is the time or this isn't. If it's in the air, we feel it and we all kind of we hone in on it together. I think it's just the type of environment they are, because we'll talk about later with Connor specifically and something just like this. But so yes, they're talking about how negative the vibes are for the Habib fight. Connor wasn't training specific things. He was training just to beat people up. He was bringing in the Habib clone just to beat
Right.
him up, kind of deal, And he's not training anything in particular. He's just out for blood on these guys. And then this is why I was confused, because I was like, I thought I heard him say no
I think he
pads,
meant
which
no
would have.
pad work.
Oh, okay, okay, fair, fair. Yeah, because I was like, how the anyway? Yes, that probably makes more sense. So yes, so he ends up kicking him, or they fall somehow. They don't actually. You don't really see what happened. It's very hard to understand how this happened. But Connor's pinky toe dislocates. It pops out of place, and he is instantly in pain. And he's sitting on the couch, and they want to set it back. And I can assume. Now, I'm not a doctor. I am also not anybody who has gone through this. I can assume that this would really, really hurt. The second thing, I can assume this would be really, really hard to do if the person is sweaty. Like, holy shit, think about the idea of like, all right, I'm gonna do it, and then like you slip. It's like, dude, like I'm trying, dude. You could wipe it, but like, I don't know, like
Yeah,
it's
this is
crazy.
the balloon toe incident, of course. I mean, not that one, but this is
Nope.
yeah,
Yeah,
this
this
is
is the original balloon toe.
proto balloon toe. I mean, again, this kind of goes to something that will be a recurring theme is just realizing that behind the scenes, Connor, I guess, pretty injury prone. I mean, obviously we know that now more so than we ever did, but like if this type of thing was happening on a more consistent basis in training situations, that I mean, Connor has gone through a lot of like behind the scenes injuries, and this being among one of the more early major ones, at least that we know of. Because yeah, coach resets the toe right there in the gym. It got dislocated. He resets it right there in the gym. Connor takes it like a Chad. Absolutely, though. I mean, like he did not. Like that's what you're kind of leading up to. That like this must have been like super painful, but he basically is just like that was easy.
Well, and that's the thing is, obviously, yes, Connor is an absolute Chad, but I find this is where humans are interesting. It's because, like, bro is like, he's crying out to the gods, like, oh my God, this is the worst. But oh shit, that was fucking good, man. Like, damn, like, how the hell are we able to do
Such a
things like that?
legend.
It's very crazy. Yeah, no, absolutely. So, they tell him, that was easy. Give him a week's time. I even think that's what he said. Give it a week's time, and I'll be good to go. I'm right
Yeah.
back on it.
Well, and my
He,
thing
you
was
know,
is you're talking about like the vibes and everything, which again referenced very often. I was like, are we being led to believe that this toe injury had anything to do with the outcome of this fight? Was my question, because it's like knowing what we know about the fight itself and what we're going to see leading up to it. I mean, I think that it's more of just like these are the adversities that you go through leading up to a fight, but like. If that's the whole part of the in any part like the vibes thing, like that was not really a big part of why this went down the way that it did.
it's not about it's not about having like a fallback, like, oh, that's the toe, he lost because of the toe. It is, yes, showing the adversity, but it is also showing one specific point where Connor could have
True.
bitched out, for he could have said, my toes broke, I'm done, which
He would.
not bitching out, but obviously we have seen in the future this is what he
Right.
had done. But he even talked about, in his prime, when he was doing this, he would fight through the adversity kind of deal. But now that he's past all that, like he doesn't have to, I'll wait it out kind of deal. He feels that
Mm.
way. Right now, in this moment, the toe breaks. He could have went to the hospital. He could have got a boot. He could have got surgery. They popped it right back in place. He continued on. Give me a week, and I'm gonna go. He even says right here, it's just toes. I'll still smack him.
There
Yeah,
you go.
So it's good. It was a
Well,
good
that
one.
all ended up working out because we end up in New York City now, 16 days before the Habib fight. And there's Dylan Dennis. Dylan Dennis getting a lot of screen time at this point. Um,
I loved
yeah,
it.
yeah. And then this is leading up, of course, to the press conference here.
You hold on. I have Dylan Dennis a little ways down. Let me see here. Hold on. So yes, Dylan Dennis is here. But so yes, we're flying out for the New
Yeah,
York press
he'll get
conference. It's a
more
2 year.
more screen time later, like actually talking and stuff, but he's just in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So he's a 2 year layoff for Connor, 26-0 Habib, as we said. If we get the first question, we get the first answer, and Connor immediately goes at Habib. We've all seen this press conference, but they picked specific moments that they really wanted to show. Obviously, took a shite in the bus, Connor with the proper 12. They didn't show the part of him trying to give Habib the
Yeah, well,
drink.
see, I mean, they, like you said, very selective about the things that they do and do not show in this. But this was one of the more epic press performances from Conor at the time. Of course, I mean, Proper 12 playing a big supporting role in the whole thing, that being a part of it, and then him taking the shot there on stage. I said Aljamain Sterling and his rum could never dream of this level of promotion. But yeah, and Habib just sitting there taking all of it. I remember this very clearly when it all happened, and yeah, it was quite the spectacle.
Aged pretty crazy, didn't
Yeah,
it?
absolutely, to be sure.
And I'm actually even more surprised with how it turned out that they did a face off. Like they did a legitimate face off the first time. Connor was, Habib obviously was chill. Connor was in his face. He was sniffing
Said
him and
blue
shit.
lips. I
It,
can see blue lips is what he said, and I was like, I didn't get it at first, and I was like, wait, oh, because he's gonna be okay, he's gonna be a corpse. Gotcha. Okay, now it makes sense, but I didn't get it at first.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was thinking like oxygen, like, oh, he's like, whatever. I don't know. Connor with the mind games, great. So then they wrap, they do the face off, and then this is actually a really good part of it because you just saw Connor go completely
Mm.
mad. He's doing his whole thing against Beep, goes outside, fucking parties with the crowd, just fucking loves it. Crowd is outside. People are outside of the venue just waiting to get an opportunity to see Connor, knowing that they never do it. But here he does bust out the fucking back door, coming to celebrate, sign autographs, drink proper 12, and then he gets in this fucking Lamborghini like the Joker and just
Well, and this is also juxtaposed with a voiceover who I believe is Luke Thomas speaking, and he's saying that he's talking about how dark the presser was, and says the quote, "This is what it looks like when the king goes mad." And I was like, all right, Luke Thomas, or a Luke Thomas like person. I said it might have been that, but the fans ate it up, and that's what you're talking about there.
Absolutely. And so then we go to Las Vegas, 15 days until the fight. We're checking the toes. This woman is feeling on, and obviously if he had just had a dislocation and if it was still sore or something, he would be wincing a lot for how fucking hard but she says that there's no bone chips, and I'm like, I've felt my bones a lot. I don't know if I've ever, and obviously I don't have bone chips, but I feel like that's a really hard thing to just like, that sounds good. No bone chips
She
to
knows
me,
what she's looking for. She's a doctor. She's also Dr. Batty
Fair.
over here, by the way. Dr.
True.
Heather Linden, I guess, is the PI, specialist there that was attending to him, and you certainly do worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And then she tells him, training, you're going to train in shoes. You should probably train in shoes for the remainder of the camp or whatever. And this is where I noticed Dylan Dennis because he's sitting there and he's chilling, and I'm like, holy shit, what a fucking time to think about. I said, what a foreshadow for his career up until now. Like, how did that guy? He was in the initial incident that we'll talk about later, but like to think about where he's now, he's made a whole career and he is still in a way sustain the level of hatred throughout all of this kind of deal. It's
Yeah,
weird,
I
right?
mean, it's yeah, interesting to think about how he got involved in the first place, but like him staying in it and being a part of it makes perfect sense because Dylan is like he's in love with Connor. Like you can see it in this documentary in little pieces. Like there's one moment that I noticed very distinctly. They were, I think, rolling, or they were coming up off the ground, and Dylan he does these like little like good job pats to Connor, like one on the leg, and then he does a second one where it's like he's trying to like get one back from Connor. Connor just stands up and walks away, and then Dylan sort of just like looks at him longingly. I was like, this dude, you can definitely like see that Dylan is wrapped up in Connor mania, and it tracks.
No, it was definitely awesome to see Dylan Dennis. Great
How
foreshadow, of
how did
course. And
Connor
then
not go on to win every single fight with Dylan Dennis in his corner? These are the questions.
it definitely does ask questions. But so we get Connor training montage with Dylan Dennis probably, and then they specifically bring up the point where they're like, here's a picture of Habib at 155, and here's a picture of Connor at 155, and Connor's like, you see this? You see that? He's drained, bloody drained. So that was a pretty
We
funny
also
point.
saw at this point too, the power cube makes an appearance. I don't know if you noticed this, and I had to look it up because they showed the readouts of it. So sad to say, Joe Pfeiffer 181,000 on the power cube, Francis Ngannou 129,000 on the power cube, Conor McGregor 42,027 on the power cube. Yeah,
Oof,
quite the differential.
Jesus.
I mean, I don't know if he was going super hard on it or whatever, but I did think it was kind of look. They showed it. Is all I'm saying. You know,
True, absolutely. No, that is it was no, they were gauging his in different
had to have.
metrics. They,
It was
yeah,
European,
obviously it was in
right?
McGregor's. He obviously has created his own metric
His
now.
own unit of measurement.
Yes, and so there's a portion I believe Connor is talking after the hard training, and he's like, I've fallen out of love with this, but I feel like I'm really back. I feel like this is what I've needed to get back into it. And we obviously have heard everybody else say these are like horrible vibes. This is not necessarily the Connor that we want. Whatever, he's not smiling as much. He's beating up his teammates. So Connor at this point, he's bought into the idea like this is the moment. I'm gonna beat the hell out of this dude. I beat up everybody in my gym. I'm the man, and I am happy to be the villain right now. Which, and even when you look at the other side, Habib also was kind of playing. They both ended up being villains in this
Well,
story, which is kind of
and it
interesting
was
as well.
the thing that like I fall back to when it comes to that point again with these dark energies and all this kind of stuff and how ominous the camp is. This is like a framework of the documentary because we know what happened in the fight. You got wrestle fucked by the wrestle fuck king. This is like we're not talking about any kind of supernatural thing here. It literally happened to everyone else that Habib fought. So like I understand like this sort of presentation element of it, but like if you break down the actual reality, I think that's kind of different from what they're trying to display to you in this documentary.
Oh no, absolutely. And so now we are 1 week until the fight. Connor's foot feels good. He's walking into the PI. I think it was the PI. I could be wrong, but he walked into a gym because he's now, he's still in Vegas or whatever. Training complete. He's just trying to keep loose. They splice in some more old Connor clips of him talking about, I feel the energy of the crowd. I think she asked him like, was this when she asked like, what's your emotion or whatever? What do you feel? Something like that. He goes out there and feels the energy of the crowd. He's not here to sell the fight. He's not selling. He wants to kill. No joke, no
Yeah.
act. And that's an old clip that they spliced in at this moment. So it's always been there, this kind of
Right.
mentality,
Yeah.
I
Again, this
feel.
is another good example of them utilizing old clips to inform current timeline pieces.
Absolutely. And then so we're jumping let's see, 1 week from the fight, and then we jump to 4 days until the fight. And this is where we get the open workouts to a full fucking arena. Isn't that crazy to think about? That Connor had open workouts and they sold out the arena for that.
Yeah, I mean, again, Connor Mania at its highest at this point, and literally anytime because there were like, I mean, if you think about how long the press conferences were, and I think we're gonna be coming up on the second one where he's a little bit late to it.
Mm.
But when you think about how long those press conferences were in their totality, to think that there was that big of a crowd for essentially 15 minutes of speaking time, this is just the cult of personality that this guy drew. So it's interesting to look back in those terms because it really was as advertised, all of that. Like it was that big.
Absolutely. And so much like today, the questions that were being asked, he's been out for so long, which Connor shows up, this is after boxing, this is after, all this other shit, time off, so anything to think on that thinking?
Well, I thought that it was kind of cool from a filmmaking standpoint that that little shot of the Vegas Strip where they superimposed the commentators on like the buildings and stuff. I don't know if you noticed that there was like,
Mm,
they're kind of doing a sweeping shot of the Vegas Strip and it's like, Ariel will be over here and this person over here, like just kind of like on billboards and stuff. I thought that was kind of like a cool little way to present that information. And also, damn, Uncle Chael getting the Habib call correct. I was like, geez, Uncle Chael with the never a correct take ever in life. He called this one correctly. Amazing.
absolutely. Chill is undefeated. I don't know if you knew that.
True, indeed he is.
But yes, so Habib is sitting at the press conference and he is not wasting any time. If Connor doesn't want to show up, he's leaving. I'll see you at the fight. And then you get the interview question. Will you shake Conor McGregor's hand after the fight? No way. No way, bro. This personal. This
Yeah.
personal.
I
Yeah.
was
So
gonna
that
say,
was
what the fuck do you think, buddy?
yeah, that was I mean, come on. I actually do kind of respect the
No,
question,
I know, I know. And again, I mean, it's the guy's job to ask that question too.
And,
But it's
and at that time, what we saw with Strickland and Hamzat, if you would have asked the question, are you guys going to hug after the fight? I'm sure you'd have been like, no way, brother. No way. I kill
yeah,
this guy.
for
It's like,
sure.
fuck, here we go. So either way, no way, this is personal. Really, really, I really like the response from Habib. No way, no way. Like he's like, no fucking chance. Either way, so Connor shows up late, of course, and I love his response. There must be a McGregor fight in town. There's traffic. So
Yeah.
that was pretty good. Irish fans are all over. We get a weight cutting montage. We get the ceremonial weigh-ins, and then we get the final face-offs.
Yeah, so I thought, I mean, just to touch on the weight cutting portion for a second. I mean, obviously, this is like the truly glamorous portion of the sport, right? He's
Mm,
sweating, he's in the bag and all that. They're in the sauna, and I'm like, I would have liked maybe a little bit more of that portion, just to see Connor doing that. Having to go through that part of this sport a little bit more. I think it would have been interesting. I don't think it was like obviously he didn't have any like traumatic things happen in that weight cut, or they probably would have shown it, but like just because of this being, all MMA centric from Connor's life, I think that might have been something more interesting to show a little bit more of. But, regardless, like you say, we move on from that pretty quickly. And he does drop the line, fuck peace. This is never over. Excuse me. Fuck peace. This is never over. And, he certainly kept his word on that.
absolutely. No, and so now we're skipping to the day of the fight. This is fight night, guys, and this is a really interesting portion. If you watched one episode, I don't think you're gonna understand not the payoff, but the differences. So when you watch this scene, it opens up. Connor is at the table eating alone with both of his belts. Now, keep in mind what he does before fights later on in his career, because this one is key. At this point in his career, there's no sitting around with the family before the fights. No, he's he's scarfing down fucking rice, and he's got both of his belts sitting right next to him. And I'm like, I didn't expect anything less, to be fair.
Yeah,
So
kind of iconic, I have to say.
yeah, and so he gets packed up and he gets into his fucking $1 million car, $1 billion ride, whatever, and then he's headed to the arena. And somebody say, I think it was the coach. He's never seen this level of hatred from Connor. This goes back to he's loving it while everybody else around him kind of doesn't. They're on edge about Connor with the vibes. So
Sure.
this is just adding to it. He's loving what's going on here. And then he's in the back, he's getting his gloves on, warming up. He spent his whole life getting both belts. And then we get an old clip of him saying, uh, talk is whatever, but we still have to get in the cage. So we're getting a portion where he's talking about the promos. He can talk all he wants, but he has always been the guy who will get in the cage at the end of the day. And he even talks about martial arts at a specific point, not just this fight itself and talking itself, but getting in the cage and having the respect right there for somebody. Even Connor at this point was talking about getting in the cage with Habib was a respectful act. Both of them, like that is the beauty of martial arts, is that we could both do this together, kind of deal. Like, so that is an interesting point here. As much as he wanted to believe that this is the most that he hated in this, but deep down he still understands that it's martial arts. This is competition, beauty at the end of the day for that. So
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. I think that is a very true and should always be recognized as a major part of this sport. For all of the elements of socio-political things that go on around the world. We've got every country pretty much represented in mixed martial arts in some way, shape, or form. But this brings us together for legitimate competition, and I think it's a net positive in that regard. We're not out here killing each other for real, for real. We're out here settling differences perhaps, and respectfully competing against one another. I think that is a good thing.
absolutely, in theory. I mean, obviously it plays out a little differently than that, but
Of
yes.
course,
And
yeah.
then
Well, and that right there actually is a good example of something that I'll talk a good amount in the next episode about, where Connor has a lot of the right things to say at the right times, and then the reality of the situations doesn't always match up.
well, right things to say at the right time. Chael comes in with a bar, or I think Connor maybe even quotes Chael this portion. He's like, what did Chael say? He said, "I'll whoop God too," kind of deal. So that was a pretty funny one. Like, that made me laugh. But so now the stage is set. Connor walks out. Bruce drops the iconic, notorious Conor McGregor. It is still pretty fire. I mean, I don't understand how it came to be the notorious, but like it could have been the Irish plumber, like who knows? But like the notorious, it really is pretty good. And then Habib is introduced, and now it's fight time. I mean, and we've all seen the fight at this point. There's not really much that I would say is crazy. I mean, they make a point like, oh, Connor gets rocks. Like that was like the main thing about the fights early, is like Conor got hit. You know, he wasn't supposed to get hit. He got rocked. He gets taken down, smashed a bit. Round three starts, and this is they're you know they're Habib is looking more tired than ever. You know, this is we've never seen him look like this. Connor, they're trying to make it seem like, again, because you go back to how dominant Habib was. He's never lost a round. They're portraying this as like Connor was the man to get rounds off of him, kind of deal, or whatever the story is. So
Oh, for
I,
sure. Yeah.
I kind of liked it. It was a good it was a good story narrative. You know, if I'm invested in it, this is good for me.
Yeah, they do a nice job of breaking it down round by round in very succinct chunks, you know. So you get round one where Connor gets laid on pretty much, you know, Anik drops the classic every round begins on the feet, you know, iconic as every time he says it. Habib gets caught by Connor in round two, or he caught Connor, excuse me. Habib caught Connor in round two and ran for the knee. I said, would have been a legal strike if he had landed that knee, and it would have been crazy if he had landed it effectively.
Mm.
But of course, that was not to happen. And I said any of the Baku refs would have stopped the fight in round two based on what we saw. You know, we got lucky it was Herb. Here in this situation, Connor should have landed illegal elbows and he would have just won the fight outright. But I digress. Habib ties it in round three, and Connor takes it with the striking. But of course, round four is where everything really goes down, and that's what you were just talking about with Habib getting, at least on commentary, all saying that he's so tired. But of course, then you know, he ends up jumping the you know, with the jump in the back and getting the rear naked there. The face crank, of course, is what it ended up being. That's always the important note of that. And yeah, and that ends up being the fight essentially. Like I said, just basically as fast as I just talked it through was how they were presenting this information. They didn't dwell on anything too long, which I thought was good because, you know, I think most people have seen the fight that are watching this documentary.
Well, and then they, you know, you're talking about not dwelling on much. And then so the next portion that they just dwell on zero bit, they just zero care about this next portion, which I find crazy that it's in the documentary and then we just never really give a shit about it. You know, how did this even begin should be the real question. Like, obviously with the dolly or whatever, but how did that, you know, we obviously had the fight. How did that turn to we're gonna jump over the cage and jump Dylan Dennis? It's like where did that portion of the story go?
That
Like
it's so funny that you say it that way too, because yes, I have in the notes. Habib gets the win, jumps the fence, does the Mortal Kombat 2 flying kick to Dylan Dennis, and I said it's funny the way they edited it because Dylan doesn't really do anything to provoke it, so it's really a why fuck me for a moment, you know?
yeah, no, yeah, he jumps in. I love the kick. He obviously jumps, does the and it's and again we go back to Dylan Dennis of just where his career is now. He started with Habib here. You know, Habib jumps the cage and comes to him because, again, in the story, we have no idea what Dylan Dennis has done. Like, he is just some guy. He's just a training partner. And now, you know, 8 years later, or whatever it is, or whatever, he is still getting into the scuffles with the Muslim Brotherhood. Like, John Pork literally just punched him in the head like last year, kind of deal. And now he's no longer able to come to UFC events. So it's absolutely hilarious that, yes, so Habib jumps the fence, does the drop kick. And this is where I can't believe nothing ever amounted to this and there wasn't anything to happen because we had fans. These were fans, you know, teammates, whatever you want to say. But as of what the people in the cage, this is fans that jump in here and start throwing punches at McGregor. And I can't believe that nothing ever in the story is told more about this. Like, dude, these dudes jumped in here. They almost beat the hell out, you know. And then we go to the back and it's like, man, McGregor's really sad that he lost. It's like, brother, I want to know who these people were. They need to go to jail. Like, what the
Yeah, well,
fuck?
I mean, you know, in the reality of the, you know, the like life outside of this documentary, of course, a lot of stuff happened because of this. But in the documentary, it was I thought actually kind of an interesting choice from a filmmaker standpoint because really what it signaled to me, because what we cut to there is McGregor in the back and he's watching Bruce announce the outcome of the fight. He's watching the fight announcement from backstage because he had been whisked away, you know, as everybody's attacking each other and whatnot. He gets shuffled off to the back. And so watching Bruce announce the outcome, excuse me, watching Connor, watching Bruce announce the outcome and letting it sink in that he is defeated in this moment. That is the moment I referenced earlier where you really get this rare glimpse of, you know, Connor like letting it sink in that he did not win the fight and just feeling crushed and defeated. And it's kind of rare that you ever see that from Connor. You don't see that side of Connor almost ever. So I thought that was kind of to say not only, you know, that this was what was the reality of that moment, but also to say that the post fight scuffle stuff didn't really matter in the big picture to Conor, because like the win was what mattered to Conor, and he did not get that. And of course, Dana's going to come in and talk to him about that, and he'll basically say as much. But I thought, again, from a filmmaking standpoint, it kind of made sense because all that other stuff is just extra, you know?
No, absolutely, and you're right. Dana comes in there, and this is where I find it interesting too. It's like, Dana, bro, you just had people try to attack your fighter. You're just gonna chill here? Like, come on, brother, you got some shit to do. But anyway, I understand. Like, they were attacking Connor. He's my big ticket. Let's go check Connor.
Sure.
He asked him if he's okay, and he's like, I don't care about the bloody guys jumping in the cage. I lost the fight, mate. You know, and Dana's like, all right, let me know if you need anything, couple $1 million, whatever, like, just let me know, so shakes his hand, leaves. And this is the part that, again, Connor Jr. runs over to him, and it's like, as frustrated as he is with the loss, like, Connor Jr. was there for him, kind of deal. So you see that moment of happiness. He sits there and sits with his son, and they have a moment of clarity, kind of deal. And I thought that was a good moment there.
Yeah, it was definitely sweet in that moment for sure. And I really am not trying to be a hater, so don't take it as such with this. But what I said to this is that, of course, it is sad that he lost, but this is the reality for a lot of fighters. And if he didn't make this a blood feud in the first place over Artem Lobov of all people, Connor, he didn't have to have, like, this didn't have to be this way. Like, Connor kind of made this the way that it ended up being, based on all of this external stuff that he created. So, like, again, I do feel for him in this moment. Obviously, he wanted to win the fight. He did not win the fight. It's a very traumatic thing in that regard. But the circumstances of why this fight was so important were kind of self-imposed.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, he wrote the check and he cashed it. I mean, that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. You don't
Yeah,
always Connor had made a living, writing those checks. And so he did a good job up until this point. This was just the one time, obviously with Nate Diaz, but this was just the one time that it really ended up humbling him, of course. Like, there's a drastic change coming going forward. Like, we are never going to see this portion of this again, and if we do, it's like, brother, go in your rocking chair, old man, kind of deal. So
sure.
it is definitely interesting. I love this point too. Connor leaves, he walks out, and this is seeing portions like this as a fight fan and somebody who keeps up with a lot of the fighters, and knows that a loss doesn't mean everything. This dude walked out of the fight on his own 2 feet. I mean, what can you say? He went in there for competition. It's not like he. Sometimes people get carted out to the fucking hospital, and I'm not gonna say they lose aura for that, but at least Connor walked out on his own 2 feet. We're not gonna be able to say that later with fights. So in this moment, at his lowest, he walked out. He took his L like a man, chin held high. D right by his side, kind of deal. And they got in their $1 billion Lamborghini and drove away. And then he also says, leaving it, I think this is him saying it, it takes away from what it's meant to be when there's animosity in the something like that. And I thought that was a really good one. Fighting is a small portion, it's only 10 to 15 minutes. I'm actually, this is the coach talking now that I remember, because it's about what Connor can do with his image.
Yeah, he says not all about fighting. I said, I think this is
Yeah.
his coach talking. Yeah, and he's like, he's got this platform to do good or bad with, and I was like, well, there's one bad thing that's kind of consistently missing throughout all of this, but fair enough that you're framing it this way. Again, like, we're gonna talk about it going forward in a lot of these, where it's like this, just the cycle that Connor gets himself into, where it's like the highs and the lows and how he reacts to each of those. So in this moment, in this instant, of course, we're going to be now cutting later on to 4 months after the fight, and Connor still has to do his community service, in relation to the Dolly incident. So he's at a church sweeping up, and I was like, man, they really made this man pay for his heinous acts here, sweeping up a church.
Well, this is actually interesting, because this is another point where I feel like they threw a montage in here just to reel us back into a point that I feel like we got lost in. They're talking about all the bad blood with Habib, and then they give us a montage of the court case, and it's like, oh yeah, he did do something bad, and it's like, now he's gotta pay up. 4 months later, and I get it, it happened after the fight. This is chronologically, but it kind of felt like, oh yeah, yeah, we are talking about that. We just talked about that was just side shit. Now we got to talk about him paying his dues. That's
Sure.
the important stuff. So yes, first day of community service in Brooklyn, New York. He's in the car, and this is where you get the first glimpse. And I said, this is the type of person that I feel like I am. Everything's there for a reason. So he's reading this church wall, and he's just like, "Oh, you see that over there? Like that's interesting. Like it's I never even it's like the first glimpse of him being able to recognize things that speak to him. It's not something that, hey, did you see that sign? It's like I'm reading that kind of
Yeah,
deal.
and again, this is another one of the things about Connor that is very fascinating on a human level to me is that like in this church, he's reading this poster, he's inspired by the words on the poster, and it's
No,
like,
that's not yet. This is him just driving by reading the church wall
oh, wait, he's
because
reading the wall. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yes, yes,
the outside of the church.
we'll
Okay.
definitely talk more about him finding more scripture to read into. But yes, this is just where he's looking at the wall, and we get an old clip of him talking about mentoring. He said he never wanted to be a role model. He doesn't see himself as like someone to look up to, but I mean, that's just the role that he's been granted, and now it goes to him sweeping in the church. He's putting the scriptures in the little cases or whatever. He's putting the little pads down for people to sit. It doesn't look like the craziest thing. I mean, for a person
Yeah,
who should be serving community service, I would have loved to see him on the side of the goddamn highway.
I was say
But
slap on the wrist at best.
but either way, so yes, everyone sees what Connor is doing, good or bad. It's always going to be in the spotlight. So that's another main thing. And this is where he reads the poster. And this was a weird looking poster. Am I like, I don't know what it was.
It
It
was
seemed
like a
like,
bunch. It was like a bunch of people's faces, and then I guess it had like text underneath it.
yeah,
But fair enough. I mean, but the thing that was striking to me is that Connor, like, you can sort of feel that like he actually is internalizing the messaging here. It's like be the
yes,
best version of yourself for you, for your family, for your community, for your church, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like he's taking that information in, and like to me as a person who knows more of Connor's life and all the other things, it's like where do these things all go in his mind is what I ask myself in a moment like that, because it's like you can tell it's affecting him, you can tell that he's internalizing that, but then does he file it away and then just allow himself to go off the good path? Like, I mean, I had in the notes, I said, I guess it finally did take decades later, or half a decade later, when he eventually did end up getting saved. He's a religious man now, or so he claims, but it's like in that moment you're like, yeah, like take it and actually keep it in. You know what I mean? Like instead of going to the things that are the negative, it's just this like constant cycle, is this push and pull that he has in his life.
absolutely. And so he keeps, he sees more things that are speaking to him. Everything is like divine intervention at this point. Like
Right.
he is feeling the moment. He's talking with the church people. He's like, man, when I came in here, I really thought this was gonna suck. Like I thought this was gonna be horrible. But you guys are cool. This was a really uplifting experience for me. He felt that what he did in the past, it led to this moment right here, and that's something that, again, Connor's just feeling. He is a very spiritual person, whether he's religious at the time or is religious now. He had always felt like there was something guiding him towards something. So that it is very interesting to see. Like I said, he's talking with the people at the church. He's changed his mind. Like these are things that are like opening his third eye, whatever you would say. So we go back to the church, and he's telling him how much this means to him and that he's sad he has to go. And then the coach comes over to talk, and he's talking about Connor's mistakes, and he's happy that Connor's getting back to a positive vibe. We were talking about the negative vibes that Habib was bringing. This is a positive vibe of Connor.
Yeah, and he's saying that people love Connor for his authenticity is basically what he's getting at in this portion here. And I
Mm,
was like, that authenticity cuts both ways when it comes to Connor, and that's basically what I was just talking about a little earlier. Is that, it's like, yeah, he is always authentically himself. It's just you get all of the extremes that come with that. And then also interspersed with all of this at this point is also when his baby daughter is born. So
yes.
this is like all kind of a an interesting dynamic that you have here after the loss, now with the community service and this kind of connection to religion, the birth of his daughter. It's like a lot of different elements kind of coalescing at the end of this episode.
Absolutely. And then so now we're skipping 5 months after the fight. He's saying that he was caught not taking it serious enough. Like this is what his career is. This is his life. He's not gonna ever slip up again. He wants to show that martial arts. He's all in to martial arts. And then we obviously get more social media splice ins about talking how washed Conor McGregor is. What are the deals around Conor, blah blah blah. We get Ariel talking about the doubt that people have in Conor. Don't doubt him though. We've learned this before. It's got the old Conor clip, and he's explaining that excuses are for losers. It is what it is. If you lose, it happens. You must lose in this game to succeed. It's a sport. Look to learn. The day you stop learning is the day you start losing. Love
And
it.
and yet again, this is another portion that I say, Connor says a lot of the right things at a lot of the right moments. Now, I mean, a lot of these clips are from older portions too, so they're interspersed very strategically, but
Yeah.
it is the right thing to say in that moment, juxtaposed again against the critics and all of this. And then you also at that point get the teaser for the next episode, which is the handbrake. And we're going to talk about that, of course, but you get that teaser. You also get he hasn't won since 2016. And then we end the episode right there. So we are leading into the events of the next episode.
Absolutely. Yeah. So do you want to do a break on see if we want to talk about episode 1? Do we just want to roll
Yeah,
into
well,
episode 2 or
sure. I mean, I have an overall review of, how I felt about it. So yeah, break it down. Chase, what did you think of episode 1 after talking it through here?
I thought episode 1, once you get past the interesting starting point of the McGregor documentary, I feel like it is very, very good for a first episode to jump you right in. They start with the biggest hits, kind of deal. I find it's to start with this one. Obviously, chronologically, they're progressing. But to start with this one, you would have thought this would have been the last episode, like oh the big fight. This is his biggest fight ever. That's going to be the final episode. But no, they give what you want first. They want to draw you in and hook you because they'll give the casual viewers the biggest thing, and then if you're a real fan, you'll go on and watch the other ones. So I respect it. I like this first episode.
Yeah, again, I feel like I'm going to be the bad guy in a lot of this review, but I found this to be boring. I think that this was a sanitized look at Connor's life, focusing on his quote unquote struggles when all it is more of a detailed version of a UFC embedded episode. None of the stuff here are things that are really all that fascinating about Connor to me. I mean, Connor is a very fascinating person, but watching him in the gym does not really interest me all that much. And the elements that were the more salacious parts, the more interesting parts are kind of breezed over, and the story keeps moving at a brisker pace because we're on to the next thing, and we also don't want to linger on any of the really negative stuff. The only time that you get any real negativity about Connor from this is when his coaches are saying, yeah, he goes through those bad times, yeah, he does have to overcome certain obstacles, him in the courtroom getting a slap on the wrist. It's like these things are not, it's not, it's very fluffy to me is what all of this feels like. So I'm not saying that it's poorly done. I think that it is for the type of documentary that they're trying to do and how they want to portray their subject. They're doing a good job of presenting information like that. And for Connor fans, I think it's probably an interesting look into, a more intimate version of his life that they don't get from regular TV and his interviews and stuff like that. But I don't know. For me personally, I would like to have seen the closer to the actual reality than what I think this is giving me.
I think the ending of the episode really kind of brought it there for me. Like, I mean, the Habib stuff is cool, whatever. The beginning is fine, after the surgery, cool. The ending where you're really seeing a side of Connor that I feel like it spoke to me. Like, things were speaking to him, and that was resonating with me, kind of deal. So I think the ending really kind of that's where I bought in. Like, man, Connor isn't. He's not he's not driven by a certain thing. Like, he just kind of goes with the flow. If something's here, and maybe that speaks to a lot of the issues that he's had in the future, of course, but he's very impulsive is kind of what it seems like. If something is there that speaks to him, he goes for it, he follows, kind of
And
deal.
that'll be a point that'll come up in the next episode, like how he reacts to his surroundings and things like that. Like he's reactive in a way that like is almost a mirror of what's going on around him, and that to the type of person that Connor is can be somewhat problematic at times, of course. So like it's an interesting look at that regard. Like there are bits and pieces of what I'm talking about there. Like we talked about the after the fight when he's backstage internalizing all of that, things like that I found to be somewhat interesting. The family dynamic I find to be interesting, all that kind of stuff. But like when you're cutting it in with the same essential training footage that we see from every single fighter, it's like there's only so unique Conor can be in that regard. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, he is still sparring. He is still hitting pads. It's not, there's not too much new that you can get out of that. So I didn't find it to be all that satisfying from that standpoint. I would have liked a little bit more of the other side.
I definitely understand that, but no, it was a good introduction. I'm really excited to continue watching on because this is new for you. So I'm excited to hear what fresh opinions are about this as somebody who's seen this twice now.
Sure thing. Well, then that does lead us right into episode 2, which is called As Real as It Gets. And of course, if Connor's toe was a proto balloon in episode 1, then his hand is broken in episode 2. And we are 12 weeks off from training because of this now. All right, 12 weeks past from the last portion here. So I say, I guess Connor's always been injury prone is what I gleaned from this, that like there's a lot that you do not see when it comes to injuries with this sport. And we know that to be the truth. Like think about when Dricus du Plessis broke his foot in the fight before they offered him the Israel Adesanya fight, and like him saying, "Hey, I need the time off to heal up," and how big of an issue that was at the time. Like most of the time, it would have been like, "Bro, just don't say anything. Just go and take the fight. We'll figure it all out during the training camp." It's like that turned into a huge problem for him at that portion of his career. A lot of fighters do exactly what Conor does. So I mean, like if there's anything I can certainly respect, Conor's commitment is unshakable. You know what I mean? Like these types of things, he was so upset. There's going to be the portion here where the doctor tells him 12 weeks off of training because of this injury. You can see how upset that makes him. I mean, he's not a guy who wants to be sitting around doing nothing. He can't be that guy. And, he's very singularly focused when he is in that mental state. So, I do respect that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we open up with the hand injury. It's specifically a joint injury, which they say is worse than a fracture because it's going to require surgery. You're going to be out for 12 weeks. And then you get an old clip of Connor here where he's talking about you're fighting yourself daily. I'm always fighting depression. This is the thing that I deal with daily. If I can't train, I can't work, and it's tough, but others have done it. So I will too. I'll just progress on.
Yeah, he says, without fighting, it's you versus you. I said, Connor is speaking to exactly what Dustin Poirier is going through right now. And this is only 12 weeks that Connor has to deal with it. So, I don't think that many people can really fully understand that if they're not fighters themselves, just how real of a thing this is for fighters and how much fighting as a singular focus in their lives when it's not there becomes, a very aimless position for fighters. So, Connor just with these 12 weeks off, and we'll going forward, we're going to see him and how he circumnavigates that to an extent. But the reality when it comes to this mindset, when fighters have fighting removed from their lives is a very real problem. And obviously we just saw Dustin going through it too.
No, 100%. And then this is where we get the title card, McGregor Forever, and the episode is called As Real as It Gets.
Real as it gets.
Yep. And so now we are in May of 2019, and we got Connor trying to work through his injury so he doesn't sit around. He's trying to do his rowing machine, but hold it at a specific angle so he doesn't bend his thumb. And I may remind everybody, this is one of the nastiest looking injury. Like, this is disgusting. He has literally rods in his fucking thumb, and it's
pins with the balls on the end of them. It's like, yeah, that it is a real deal thing here, man. He had to have his hand like set for it, and yeah, you see those little balls coming out in those two spots. It's like obviously that is that's not your average hairline fracture kind of situation.
and then so not even just the surgery itself and having these pins in his hand, it also got infected. He had to be on antibiotics. And I also think it's really funny. He's like, I'm without a paw right now, and it's like, why do you call your hand a paw? Like you are hilariously maniacal. I don't know why you would say that, but yes. So he calls his hand a paw, which is really funny. And then you go back to another old clip, and they're asking how much of the fight game is mental. Connor's like, how much is mental? 100%. Some would say 99, but the mind is powerful. What's stopping me when I have control of this up here? Combat sports was to manage his emotions, and now he's getting comfortable, and his, again, mind, the mind is very powerful. That's something that he wanted to reiterate.
Yeah, and I mean, this is very like these are the kinds of things that I appreciate from a documentary like this. Hearing him talk in this way, because I'm like, it's interesting hearing Connor talk about the mental aspect of the sport and processing emotion. He's a very emotional person in general, so like hearing him intellectualize his processing of emotion was something that was interesting to me. And I'm like, it's always that he's right on the cusp of legitimate like high-minded thought at all times, but then he just goes and does whatever, and that's what's frustrating about him. So like it's like you hear that he has that ability to process these things mentally. He's not a dumb guy. I mean, when you hear him speak, obviously you can pull out, he's been one of the most recorded men in history, so I'm sure you can pull out a million different times that he's not sounded intelligent, but like you hear him talk in a capacity like this, that there's an intelligence in there and an emotional maturity that comes with that to be able to recognize these things. But then he just does whatever, and that's what really gets me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's unfortunate because, compare him to someone like Bryce Mitchell, guys. I don't
Sure.
know. Whatever. But so August 2019, we're at the baptizing of the daughter party, and this is where we get to see Rich Connor in full effect, just hanging around a mansion, full suit, I think. Might even been in a suit at this point, I think. But either way, Gunnar Nelson is at the goddamn party.
That's right. Goat Gunnar Nelson sighting at the christening party for sure.
And he's talking about his injuries, telling him like, I had my thumb reset, my shit was all fucked up, my paw was out, and then we get Ariel to come talk about Connor's injuries. Connor is finally human. We are seeing that side of Connor that he can get hurt. He cannot be healthy 100% of the time, which we know wasn't true. But
And that's what's going to be my point, is that it's interesting hearing Ariel talk about Connor being a beacon of good health. Like we haven't seen him injure himself at least twice within these two episodes now. So injuries in this sport get well hidden. So, I mean, really, like not only from a better perspective, of course, we talk about that a lot on the podcast, but just, from a human perspective, you got to realize that like, your favorite fighter is going through struggles that you will never know about.
100%. And that's where it comes to the point where I'm glad that I know a little, I'm not as naive. And I know for me, I would not want to go through any of that. I have bills to pay and a job to work. I can't just have a broken foot because I fucking kick somebody too hard. Like I'm cool on it. I
Well,
need limbs.
sure. And when you think about it from a perspective of fighters that are just coming up, I mean, we've got a number of friends who are, younger fighters that are just starting out, dealing with injuries and stuff like that. It only gets harder, I mean, like you hope that your health holds up at all times, of course, but the fight itself is only one small portion when it comes to injuries and the adversities of the sports. It's a grueling thing that not many people are built for.
Absolutely. And then so now we go to October of 2019. This is 5 months after the surgery. And Connor wants to announce the fight. If he can't get a fight, bro, December charity fight, if they won't let him fight, he wants to be active. Let Dana know, or they actually get Dana coming over top here and he's explaining how we book somebody like Connor. We got to find the place, we got to find, do you have anything to say about that? I kind of forget
Yeah.
how he worded it a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, two things. I mean, so yes, we're talking about the booking of fights. Of course, this is right before COVID. They make that point as well, that we have like this lingering thing that might be coming into play in this episode. And I remember the talks of the charity fight with Connor back when this was all going on because of how frustrated he was about getting booked. And I was like, yeah, I really at the time doubted that was ever going to be the case, but it was interesting to hear him talk about potentially being serious about that. So I thought that was interesting.
You heard it from here first, or from him first, firsthand kind of
Yeah,
deal.
right, exactly. Yes, because it had been part of the conversation broader than that, but to hear it from him was interesting for sure. And then, yes, talking about Dana and the voiceover here, I thought it was very, very kind of like, I don't know, something I appreciated from Dana, him being honest, because basically what he was saying is that like Connor fights are just structured around Connor. He essentially says we look at where the division is and we figure out how to maximize him fighting based on that current landscape is basically what he said. And it's like, yeah, any other fighter has to be like, there's a lot of X's and O's. With Connor, it's him and everything else.
Yeah, and then there was another point that Dana wanted to explain at the end. There is like, there's Connor is also hard to do business with, not necessarily hard to do business with, but he's always in a new venture. He's always doing something new. There's always a new Connor business, so he's hard to keep a tab on. He's always out off doing something, and so that's really the end of that portion. Shout out Dana White for dropping bars there for a second. But now we get to day one of the promotional tour. All people all over the world know who Connor is. Obviously, he's one of the biggest stars ever. And then he gets introduced on some local international show. I'm not familiar which region it is, but go ahead. Is there anything?
Well, two things. One, I said at this point, and I don't know what exactly led me to this note, but it is a note for the entire show, is that there are so many shots of people staring at Connor with this fawning, awestruck look on their face throughout all of this. This is, again, a little bit puffy. This is a little bit of a aggrandizing of Conor McGregor, as you would expect it to be. But, it's just funny to me to like see all these people. Oh my God, it's really him. The lady that's going to be at one of these pressers is saying exactly that. I can't believe it's really you. You're really here.
See, but you can't sit here and say, like, I can't believe they're getting shots of people doing like these are the shots they're using. Like, people went crazy for Michael Jackson too.
Oh no, no,
Like,
I'm not saying that I can't believe it. I'm just saying that it's funny that it's such a prevalent portion of it, because it is no, because it is real, and it's interesting to see people reacting to any human being that way. I guess is
true.
kind of what makes him this larger than life character. But then I also, going into what you're talking about with the press tour, I said in the notes, I was like, did I miss something? Why did we randomly cut to Kiev? Because apparently that's where we're in the Ukraine with this press tour. It's like, no. And then there's this girl that they were with for a little while. I didn't know who she was. And then I said, I guess it's a give back to the youth kind of thing, because we're going to see a portion of him giving a speech to like a youth a training class or whatever, and then eventually over the time throughout this little portion here, through context, you realize that he is doing a press tour slash charity kind of function tour through one of his foundations that he's involved with.
Yeah, I'm glad you found out that it was in the Ukraine, because I was very confused, and then I also am even more confused now. Like, that's an interesting place to go on the promo tour. Okay, but I had heard Marab and Sugar Sean went to India, so I mean, I get whatever. So either
Well,
way,
and I mean, if Russia is fighting Ukraine, then where does Connor go? To the people who are fighting Russia.
there you go, absolutely. But either way, so when you're on this show, the interviewer asks Connor, what is his true face? Because he looks happy, he looks relaxed. He looks like he's having a good time. Being interviewed as a fighter. And Connor is explaining that his attitude is based on the room. If people are having a good time, he's having a good time. If people are down, he's down. And that's to what you were saying. He gets himself into trouble because he, when the vibes are up, he's up, and he knows how to go up and above and beyond kind of deal.
Yeah,
So
he mirrors his surroundings a lot, is basically what he's saying with a lot of this. And, that definitely does show, when he's out there partying, when he's, actively focused on training. It's like, it's an interesting element with Connor, because you think of Connor as such a secure person that, like, is so strong, like internally, that he has
mhm.
like a strong compass himself. But to think that there is like the external forces that play more of a part in how he navigates is kind of an interesting element of things in that regard. Like, you'd think that with like that core being a little bit stronger, that maybe he'd be able to resist those kind of negative aspects. But he's pretty open about the fact that, like, when the party's going, I'm partying too, and
Yeah.
that's how that kind of manifests.
Yeah, and so then we get more aerial talk over, and he's talking about the stardom of Connor. Connor's got a story that's inspiring. People are living vicariously through Connor with a story like that. And then you get Connor, you get clips of him talking to the youth. He's putting on training camps or whatever, and he's explaining. They this could be you. I started at 17. You have a head start on me. You could be way more. And this is where Ariel talks about, this is why kids like Connor, is because he gives them hope. They look at him and they think that could be them. And my point here,
Mm-hmm.
this is what Josh Van will do for Myanmar.
I
So
love it. I love it. Well, this is another instance where I think that I'm going to be the bad guy, and I hate being this bad guy here, but I have to pose it. I know that I'm a little bit more nihilistic than the average person, but I don't always understand why people get inspired by others in this way, regardless of if they come from the same place. Because I'm like, yeah, he did it. you could do every single thing that he did and it not work out for you still. So
True.
like, look, that's a harsh reality that, probably should not be your mindset, right? I mean, you should always be with a clear positive focus. That's, way more than a negative one will get you, as far as how far you can take yourself. So I understand that. I guess just more, um, you know, coming from a person who feels like he's been
Okay, I think I lost Thinker or Thinker lost me.
check, check, check. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. All right, I
Was
lost about the last portion of that there. It was a good rant, though. I appreciate it.
Okay, no, well, I mean, I just followed up at saying it. If you are a person who is inspired by Connor, and like, or by any person like this, and they help you guide yourself in life, then more power to you. I just, I don't come from that perspective.
I definitely agree. It's not my thing to look at this like I don't know. I agree with what you're saying here. But the thing is that Connor is, you see him and hear him saying that it's key to invest in the future. This is what is key here. And then Ariel obviously is talking about that Connor is not, it's not just a person, it's a movement. Conor McGregor is a whole movement in Ireland kind of deal. And then he shows clips of Ireland fans, going crazy over McGregor. The Michael Jackson of Ireland, everybody. I don't know if you knew. But
Yeah, pretty
so
much.
so we skipped to the last day of the promo and we got some news. Connor has a fight January 18th in Las Vegas, but you're gonna have to ask the UFC because I don't give a fuck who it is.
That is correct. Yes, indeed. He's on this promo tour. It's the end of the tour. Everybody loves Connor. We certainly get that. And we get this fight announcement, and the UFC will tell you the opponents for sure. I said we get so much Ariel on this documentary, by the way. The two of them have always been really tight, which I can appreciate. I mean, like, Connor, with the level of access that he has to any outlet that he would like, I do appreciate that. If Ariel covered him in a fair way, or a way that made sense for both of them, that he shows that loyalty to him, because obviously Ariel is a pretty polarizing figure in this sport, but Connor consistently, always to this day, I mean, he just recently was on his show promoting the upcoming fight, so they've always had a really solid relationship.
Yeah, that is really good. I mean, out of all the people, everybody, not a lot of people like Ariel. Some people do, some people don't. But if Connor does, I mean, I guess it does say something that the GOAT of the sport wants your show to like host his appearance.
Yeah, absolutely. And power to both of them for that. I appreciate people who appreciate those who are good to them.
Absolutely. And then so we get the official return for Conor McGregor against Donald Cowboy Cerrone. And then, of course, we get our social media rundown and everybody's going to talk their shit. I think Cerrone's going to get this one done. I think Conor will get this one done. Thinker, what do you think?
Well, I thought it was funny with this. So, okay, because he just said, "Let the UFC tell you who the opponent is," right? He literally tweeted, and I remember this very distinctly. He literally tweeted before this fight was announced, saying, "Okay, Cowboy, you've earned this fight. Let's go. Like, I will give you this fight." So it's like he might not have like spilt the beans, I guess, because he couldn't do it officially, but like he was on Twitter saying that this would be the fight, and then they finally just booked it. So it was certainly around the same time that this was all going on.
And then we get the cool intro for Donald Cerrone, and then we get a montage of his finishes. Of course, he tough and skilled is what everybody's talking about. Pretty sure they show him finishing Mike Perry. I could be wrong about that.
They do, yes. They show, they're showing 2014 Cowboy highlights for a fight taking place in 2022 or whatever it was. Yeah, I thought
Love
that
to
was kind of
see it.
funny.
Get the Jim Miller head kick, Matt Brown head kick, all time leader in wins. I mean, this is a resume they're trying to build up and make you think that he should be fighting Conor McGregor. So
Legitimately. And that's, I said, the media that you were just talking about earlier, the media saying that this is a layup fight. And I was like, this was a hand-picked layup and played out exactly as such. So, interesting that everybody saw that coming from a mile away.
and so it's 10 weeks from the fight, we're explaining how much Conor is locked in. He's going to up his level though. He's locked in but he's still got more to go. When he gets, closer to the fight week, he's going to ramp it up even more. His coach didn't see any point in fighting anymore. This was a key point that he made here is, I didn't see the point for Conor to even take fights anymore. Why should you? You've made all your money, you've done all your shit, and he's seen that Conor wasn't committed last time, but and Conor saw that the commitment is what led to injuries, and I started to slip in a slippery slope, and injuries led to doubt, and doubt led to whatever non-activity. So it was an interesting portion here. 10 weeks from the fight, Conor is seeming to be in the right headspace, of course.
Yeah, saying not fully committed, with the outside of the cage stuff and needs to lock in. We get a lot of basic training footage stuff when it comes to this
Yeah.
portion. This kind of this episode, I felt sort of like had a little bit of filler to it, like not like it felt like they were stretching out portions that if there was more to talk about, that like they could have condensed, but they didn't have that much, considering that this was a pretty layup of a win for Connor. So they kind of dragged out certain areas a little bit more than others. And that might have been one of those portions. The next thing that I had was that Connor talks a little bit about a little allowances being little defeats. He says
Mm.
if you say you're going to do something and then you don't do it, it's failing yourself. And this is another time where this is a self-awareness of right and wrong that really shows the duality of him as a person with everything in his life. It's like, if you are sitting here telling me that you recognize that that is a failure of yourself, then you can't tell me that you don't recognize when punching an Italian DJ is a failure of yourself, or getting so drunk that you allow yourself to be that. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the interesting part with Connor, is that you see that he recognizes where these things lie, where the moral barometer lies, but will just allow himself to go past that point. Unfortunate aspect, I think.
It definitely is unfortunate, but we are now 6 weeks until the fight. Conor McGregor is sparring with Cerrone-sized guys. He's not planning to beat Cerrone, and this is actually something that I feel is key, because when I watched the documentary, I had seen the fight before the documentary, and I remember watching this fight, and I'm like, that is the cleanest that I've ever seen McGregor's like fight style. So when he comes in here and he's saying he's not here to beat Cerrone, he's here to display martial arts. These are different, things are different now. Don't tell yourself to do something and don't do it. He said things and said he shouldn't before. Little defeats. There we go. Connor fights best when he loves it. He's always looking to improve. And then we get old Cage Warriors clips. We get Connor talking about his obsession with fighting. It's his career because he loves what he does, and this is hard work pays off and dreams do come true. That was a key thing by Connor there. I really, good stuff being said here. I like it.
All the right things being said is always
Yeah.
always what I say about that. It's like, yeah, if you could just display that in your actions more than in your words, I think that he could be a much different figure in a lot of ways. But yeah, these early clips of Connor are certainly inspiring to an extent. You get your 60 G's, baby, and all that kind of
Yes.
shit. And Dana says Connor has the it factor, and that's why he's the superstar that he is. I'm like, we're getting a lot of rehashing of basic elements here, but they are true. So it's, you can't deny these things. Yes, I mean, this is why Connor became the cult of personality that he ultimately was, is because of all of the things that Dana's saying in this little passage here.
Yeah, and then Connor. The line that Connor drops that you didn't mention is that he was collecting welfare last week. That's a good one. I like that one at the end there.
True. Yeah, there was another portion. I don't know if it was right here or at a different part, but he's on an interview show, and he comes in and says, last time that we spoke, he's talking to the host of the show. He says, last time we spoke, you were richer than me, and like now it's like obviously the tables have turned a little bit there.
Yeah, that one was pretty good. I caught it, but I didn't. I was typing and I was like, man, what did he say? You were mean to me last time, as I think what I thought he said. Something like that. But either way, so before Connor's debut, nobody knew what MMA was in Ireland. This is another. We get another hash over that Connor is the
Yeah.
only mixed martial artist ever in Ireland.
Like St. Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland, St. Connor brought MMA into Ireland. No one had
Oh.
ever heard of it in this country before Conor McGregor, is really the point they're trying to get across here.
And to that point, I think it's really funny because I wasn't even thinking of it that way. I'm just going along with it. Yeah, Connor paved the way. Connor's happy to pave the way. Well, yeah, he just fucking pronounced that he has paved the way. I'd be happy too if I was just the dude who discovered the land that people were already on, you know?
Yeah, well, and then they had that little layup question from the interviewer, are you going to help out other Irish fighters? Of course I'm going to. It's like, yeah, okay. I mean, and we do see it. Look, I mean, this is the
Yeah,
portion leading up here. Conor is at Bellator supporting one of his teammates, and they said, I'm not trying to minimize the importance of Conor paving the way for these guys, but I could also just see the producers in the editing room, like, lining up this moment. It's like, thanks for everything, Conor. Love Ireland. You know what I mean? It's kind of what it felt like.
100%. But yeah, so yeah, he goes to the fights and he's, having a great time with his teammates and, getting to see a win. We get to see a finish from the teammate. Connor tries to jump in the cage. They pull him off, great moment, of course. And then we go to Las Vegas.
Well, so before we move on, I
Oh,
did want to say I wanted to give a little context here. So the SBG teammate Connor is at Bellator supporting is Peter Qualley. He won this match at Bellator 227, went on to beat Patricky Pitbull, then lost their rematch, loses two more after that, and then retired after an illegal soccer kick to the head. So not the greatest trajectory after all of that, but still did win in that moment.
he did win and Connor still got happy. Yes. So now we go to Las Vegas and we are 5 days until the fight. We're signing paperwork. It's time to sign posters, get the fight gear. You see Holly
I
Holm.
say if signing gloves and hugging Holly Holm.
Yep, it was a good day. It was a very good day for Connor. And then you get more Ariel, talking about if Connor fails, uh, some other shit. I don't know. It's just I'm tired of Ariel talking at this point. Not gonna lie,
Well,
but
he says that Connor is in a zen-like state before this fight, and I say Cerrone was on the verge of retirement for this fight. I'm like, I just, it's an interesting, they're trying to like give any kind of build up to this fight when this was a gimme fight. I mean, they basically say it in this episode that it was that. I mean, through context with the media, that's what this was. So it's like, yeah, I mean, you're getting the cycle with Connor here. This is the upswing of the cycle. We come from episode 1 where he's on the downswing of the cycle. This is the upswing, but the upswing of the cycle is based on kind of a hand me sort of situation. So it doesn't ring as true to me.
I think there was a really funny part as well when you think of all the iterations of Connor breaking the promos in the other language. He said me, me hablo Conor McGregor. Whatever. Like that was pretty funny. It's like you had to think like he had to do that for 237 countries or whatever.
True. Yeah. Yeah. That was interesting. And he says that, he hates that portion of doing these things.
Yeah, he can't keep a straight face. That was pretty funny. But so he gets asked about his comeback, and I got to give it all away so I can go get it back, or something that he says here. He's focusing on the skills and his inner self, and he's looking forward to the face off. This will be good.
Yeah, so just relating this to current times, the quote that I have from him there. Sometimes I have to give it all away to want to get it all back, and I said, well, conceivably, right now the worst is over for Connor in current era. I mean, all of the stuff that we were referencing with his trials and all of that is behind him at this point. Certainly gave a lot away in all of that. Proper 12 got taken away from him. His reputation has been, harmed in certain respects by certain people. I mean, I don't know if it's actually true that like, if you've seen that there were like signs in Ireland supporting Max in the upcoming fight. I don't
I
know if you saw that. Yeah. So, and again, I don't know how pronounced this actually is in Ireland, but there is a picture floating around of like an outdoor standing sign that says, "Go get him, Max," kind of thing to show that they're not supporting Connor. I say all of this to say that, like, obviously, Connor went through a lot in recent times. So if there is a portion of him that is still in that same mindset of like, I have to kind of be at rock bottom to build myself back up, this is certainly seems like one of those types of moments. So, take that into this fight, perhaps.
Absolutely. And then so we go to the press conference and Connor's chill, he's respectful, but he is always going to be the Mystic Mac and predict the KO. So that was pretty good. Cerrone's just being professional. This is what people would say is boring. Might have been, right? But they had a good, easy fight. So we'll go ahead and move on with that. Connor also drops, any weight, any division. Connor is back. He's ready. So we get a face off. I said Connor is back again. He does his
Well,
flex and
And
Yeah.
this, yes, this is humble Connor, of course, at the Cowboy press conference. And I said, this is what I just referenced earlier, the part of the fuck up, repent, and repeat cycle that Connor goes through here. So he is in humble territory right now. I that comes back around. And I mean, I don't know how deep it'll go into these other episodes. We'll talk about them when we get to them. But this is, again, if you're going around the circle, just came to the bottom. Now he's like right here on the side, going right back up to the top. So good deal with all of that. I appreciate humble Connor. Cowboy also acknowledged that. And I did want to mention Cowboy looks dope as fuck with his hat that is shadowing his entire
Yeah.
face.
It does look pretty damn cool. I wasn't going to be the one to bring it up, but I'm glad you did. I'm not
I
going to
thought it
lie.
looked pretty awesome.
But and so we're going to skip to the fight night, and this is where you get the difference. I brought this up at the beginning where he was eating food alone with his two belts. Here he's sitting at home before the fights, enjoying daddy time, playing with the kid, watching fights, keeping his hands in the gloves, whatever you want to say, and he's heading off, and Junior gets sad, and "Hey, Daddy's just got to go to work, champ," and I thought that was a pretty good one. This work, duty calls kind of deal. And
Yeah. I
Connor
thought that.
once again
Oh,
rolls out
sorry.
like a billionaire. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just thought you're exactly right. It is an interesting dynamic. He's in his house. I assume that this is a house that he owns in Vegas. And he's watching the event. I mean, the prelims
Mhm.
are already on, and he's at home still. So he doesn't have to roll out until his time or whatever. So I said it's an interesting dynamic compared to what of other fighters. Other fighters are in the hotel. They're with their team exclusively. They're kind of segregated from the rest of the world. He's at home. He's got this huge staff with him as well. I don't know if you notice how many people are there handling everything. He's got kids around, people around. Doesn't seem as conducive to focus, but obviously for this one, it worked out for him. Just, it's an interesting element compared to what of other fighters who are just, staring at the wall, basically, so
Yeah.
locked in.
Yeah, and then so this is Connor obviously having fun. He's reading the game and finding the shots. This is Connor at his best. He's getting his hand wraps. The coach is talking about Connor leaving a legacy. Connor doesn't want to leave a legacy at this point. He's continuing the legacy. This is not the stopping point. Connor is here. I think they actually may have said it earlier, but Connor treats his career like he goes through seasons. It's if he's fighting, there's another one coming until the end of the year. He and then the next year starts and he'll fight again, and then there's another one coming. That's how he tries to have his career pan out, of course. But Connor is walking out and he's looking ready, of course.
Yeah, this is also where they juxtapose some more old Connor footage where he's talking about the idea of never losing entering his mind. He does not consider losing entering his mind ever. And I thought it was interesting because that's very similar to what they added. This is not a portion that we saw in the original documentary, but this was an added scene that was included in the Smashing Machine 2025. If you recall that portion where they're interviewing Mark Kerr and he's saying like, they were asking, what would it be like if you lose? You can say, he's like, I never consider that. It never comes into my mind. I don't know if those are connected. It was just something that seemed like a parallel I wanted to mention.
No, and no, that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah, I did not actually catch that one, but I do. I'm kind of getting what you're getting at here. But so, and then the coach obviously comes on as well, and he's talking about Connor, and it's like fighting is a lot of doing the good stuff, but there's a lot of other things that come into play. Connor is the best at those other things, and that was a cool point. The coach really does have some faith in his fighter. I really appreciate having the coach having the back.
Yeah, I mean, going through as much as they have been through together. Again, one thing that you really can never fault Connor for is like his loyalty. As far as like, if you treat him well, he is going to ride with you. Obviously, Artem Lobov knew that until that soured. But like, when it comes to the coach, I mean, like, he's been SBG for his entire career. So it's like, these guys know each other like the back of each other's hands. And, he has that faith through many years of training and an entire career leading up to this point. So I think it all tracks pretty well.
And then so obviously the fight starts, and you guys know how quick it is. I mean, Connor easily beats Donald Cerrone. I mean, the head kick is what sets up the finish, but before this, he was beating dude with shoulder strikes. I mean, he busted him up easily. Head kick knocks him down, gets the finish. Connor Easy W, the Notorious, is back, and D Devlin is fucking hype, guys. I don't know if you saw her in the back. She was hype as hell for this.
Absolutely, yeah. This fight was very quick. It was a quick ride, and D says, Mystic. He Mystic Macked the head kick KO. apparently,
Yep.
that she said that everybody was, this is D talking, everybody said that he was going to get knocked out with a head kick. So he said he's going to knock him out with a head kick. And I was
Yeah.
like, we get it. Conor is superhuman. This is, more of this glaze fest, but at least when it's coming from her, it's an understandable portion of things. I mean, like I said earlier, she is as ride or die as they come. Certainly something that was also exemplified with the unfortunate court situation. If you recall, she was pretty vocal after all of that, going right after the person who was bringing the charges against Conor, which was somewhat out of character for her based on, her being somewhat in the background most of the time. But it really does go to show that she is in it with him for the long haul and always has been.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we get a team celebration. Of course, Connor is happy. He's looking back. He's in love with what he's got here. This is Connor, in a great state. Dana walks in, and was Dana just not on his shit this week or something? Did he genuinely think Cerrone's a tough guy and he's a Hall of Famer, don't get me wrong. But for him to be like, what? You fucking
Bro,
knocked out Cerrone, bro. Conor McGregor knocked out Donald Cerrone.
this was so
What?
funny. Yeah, Dana comes in the back saying he didn't see that coming. I was like, he's Dana said I thought it was going to be a war. I thought it was going to be an all out war. But I said, bro, Cowboy was on the verge of retirement for this fight. Like, I don't understand. I mean, I guess Dana may be saying, trying to build Conor up a little bit more inadvertently, like, man, I really thought that he was tougher than that. But, obviously Conor just takes them all out, that kind of thing or whatever, I guess. But it was kind of funny to be like, yeah, I thought you were going to have to work a lot harder, man.
Yeah, no, that was pretty crazy. Dana, I'm blown away right now. Like I thought that was gonna be a war. It's like he's genuinely a slow starter. Well, fucking dude, he's fucking whatever. But the very funny portion, we obviously get an aerial interview afterwards. Connor's talking about how hard work pays off, commitment is key. I'm proud. You can see he's very emotional. That this is where Connor, wants to be. This is where his heart kind of brings out of him, kind of
Yeah,
deal.
this is the good side of the Conor yin yang. You know what I mean? Like the yin and the yang of Conor McGregor is this. Like when he's in the good portion, he's humble pre-fight, he's happy in victory, he's respectful throughout all of this. When things start to change, when the tides start to turn, that's when you see the other side of this very, a two-sided person. I mean, a multifaceted person, if you want to be kind.
Absolutely. And so yeah, he's grateful for everyone who stuck around. The champs here, Irish Proper 12 toast, emotional release question. What do I have here? Oh, the emotional release question is it what the fuck did I write here? He said it's worth every penny in this sport. I forget what he was asked there, but would you something along the lines of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think saying that, that all of the emotions are heightened throughout all
Mm,
of this. So like, when you finally do get what you've been after for so long with all of this and have that the rush of everything finally culminating, that it is, it's its own high, it's its own version of of a win within a win kind of thing is I guess the message there.
and then he also was talking about how he felt like he disrespected everybody who was rooting for him and alongside of him for the journey, that he didn't take it as serious as he once should have, kind of deal, or where he should be, kind of,
Which again, always funny because you're in the good part of the yin and yang here, but then when the bad part starts to come back, where is that from Connor?
Yeah. And then so we obviously get the who's next, and when and who, I'll be ready. It's back to training and we'll carry on, kind of deal. So that was the end of that. I don't know if there's anything else you want to wrap up with our Cerrone 12-second fight or whatever
No,
happened here.
I mean that it was as quick as that. I mean the fight was very fast and this portion kind of moves on. So yeah, we get post fight it looks like Connor took the family to the Everglades for an airboat ride. So, a little Florida representation is always nice. And I said I legit thought they were pulling up to the set of Roadhouse at this point.
Yeah, no, oh my gosh, that was great. No, so yes, they get on an airboat, of course. They go on the tour. They're having a good time, nice family time. They're seeing gators. Connor sees one, he starts flexing at it. And then, everybody said,
Connor
dude,
legitimately flexing on an alligator.
this was absolutely awesome, because he's looking at the gator. He's like, look at that thing. And then everybody's like freaking out. Connor, stop. He's like, I'm in control of that thing right there.
Not only flexing, but backing down an alligator. I said, "This is the Conor we know and love right here."
Yeah, this was great. He's loving the end. This is the fruits of his labor. He's
Right.
loving this portion. He gets to hang with his family. He loves it. This is the perfect ending to where unfortunately, where the world ends up in this next scene, because it is now March 2020. Contact sports are done. It's a mutated disease taking over. Talks of welterweight before Cerrone, but the pandemic hits and everything just stops. So
Indeed. Yeah. March 2020 pandemic hits the fan, is what I have here. That is, yeah, it threw everything into a tailspin. And of course, we're going to be getting into portions of, with Fight Island and all of that coming up here. But I really, I think that this is a good time to like kind of at least acknowledge how important Fight Island was to combat sports in this time. Dana's going to go through, the whole thing about creating the bubble and all of that, and how insulated it all was. But like, regardless of that aspect of things, like when the rest of the world was all shut down, we still had our sport going on. And I think we were very lucky for that. So I really credit the UFC in this regard when it comes to everything that was done during the pandemic. Because, all of these other sports kind of had their own version of it eventually. I know that the NHL had their little bubble up there in Canada or whatever, but like, we could have been without fights for a very long time and they made it happen. So I really got to take the hat off for that.
100%. Yeah. And before we actually get into Dana talking about that, we go to April of 2020, and this is where you get to see Connor giving back.
Right.
Connor is in a position where he does not need to fight. He does not need to be around people. When the pandemic hit, he could just go off and never be seen again, kind of deal. But he did not choose to do that. He goes and he's helping out. He's dropping medical supplies off to the hospitals that had done his surgeries, which I think, bam, that's nice. That's really, really nice. I don't necessarily know how you just get a hold of medical supplies just off the cusp, but he's rich. That's just, I don't ask questions.
Makes it happen. Yeah, Connor is there with the mask and he's taking boxes out of the back of the truck. He's doing the whole 9 yards. And, again, man, it's like this is a little bit of a snow job, this documentary. So I acknowledge that aspect of things. It is nice what he is doing. It's just if he could be that guy consistently, then he would have a completely different perspective and perception in this sport, like all the time. But like it's just you get these little flecks of this.
And then so now we get Dana, he's talking about not letting COVID stop him, rolling over, quitting, hiding. None of these are in How I Am Built. That's a pretty funny, iconic bar from him. Might as well be on the Ram commercial tomorrow. But
True.
251, Fight Island, the UFC bubble, it is going to happen. I think it's a key point that Dana says right here, because I feel like it does get lost in translation, whether it's true or not. From Dana White himself, he said, I got to offer people 3 fights a year. I can't just not have fights. People got to have, I employ them, kind of deal. So it's whether they take the fight, that's on them. Connor is included in those people that if they want to take the fight, that is on them. I have to offer them 3 fights a year, kind of deal. So,
Yeah, very, very fishy as to whether or not there's any
right.
validity to that at all, of course, but that is certainly something that Dana said in this moment for sure.
Yep.
And this, of course, also was what I was just saying about Fight Island, Yaz Island. I, of course, always thought it would have been awesome if it had been just legitimately a little small island in the middle
Mhm.
of nowhere. It is technically an island, Yaz Island, but it's one in, Abu Dhabi with all the chain of islands, basically, right?
They take the ferry to the island, one person and the other person. That's how small the island should be. It's like they're just the cages on it, and for you to get there, you get off the ferry and you walk in the
That's what
cage.
I'm talking about. Yeah, and Dubai is what I meant, by the way.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's yeah. That's I thought it would have been cool like that. But either way, you cannot understate how much of a godsend Fight Island was during the pandemic for fight fans.
I will agree with you there. I wasn't around for the experience to understand. Obviously, I was with the NBA and I was watching their sort of bubble, but this was obviously, like you said, this paved the way. Dana White is a pioneer in the sense of the bubble industry. So,
Yeah.
it is crazy, and I'm very thankful for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, they're talking about booking Connor after numerous requests, saying that Connor wanted to stay active. That's what you were just talking about. And I said it's always an interesting dynamic with how and why they use or do not use Connor. I mean, you have a situation like this, obviously the Michael Chandler fight that fell through and all of the things leading up to that, the season of Tough that he did with that time. Of course, not being on the White House card just now is an interesting element with them having him fight after that. So, Connor is he is still a force of nature to an extent, maybe not as much as he once was, or a different version of it, perhaps. But he's also very much a chess piece, which is kind of an interesting dynamic as well, right? You know, you think Conor, this guy who has all this money, all of this influence, all of this power, but the organization is still the house. And you know what they always say about that? The house always wins, right?
Yeah, and this one was pretty good because, they're talking about how after Cerrone, they were supposed to jumpstart the activity again. They weren't booking Connor when the team has requested, a bunch, and then we get an old Connor clip, and this is what's going to round out the episode here of Connor talking about activity. He'll fight anybody. He'll fight his coach, cornerman, teammates. I'll fight you right now. Like, it's pretty funny. That
Yeah.
was a good line here. But no, just stay positive. Of course, nothing good comes from worry. Keep pushing on. Things will turn good. And then they give us a little foreshadow towards the next episode.
Indeed, yeah, I liked that. You know, that is something that does resonate with me. Yeah, I think it's, you could say from the other side, it's easy for Connor to say that nothing good comes from worry when you don't have to worry the same way that other people do, but he did in his life. So I mean, you know, you can't take that away. I mean, he obviously at a earlier portion of his life had the same struggles, or you know, worse struggles than a lot of people. So I think that there's validity to that, and you know, that is something that I myself have to remind myself every once in a while. Is, you know, you get all worked up over all these things, and it doesn't help. It's just clouding your mentality. So I appreciated that. You know, keep positive, shut the door, ring the bell, and no one does it better than me, he says to end the episode out. So, you know, stay tuned, and we certainly will. And that is going to round it out, unless you had anything else there.
No, I mean, I think that does round out episode 2. I mean, I think we gotta ask the question. I mean, what do we think of the episode itself? I mean, would you like to go first if you have a predetermined answer here?
Sure, because you know I do have again. Yeah, I'm coming from a little bit more of a sourpuss perspective, so hopefully you'll end up with a little bit more of a positive spin. But I said this was more boring than episode one to me. I said that if episode one felt like an embedded, this really felt like an embedded. And you know, the nice thing about the embedded series is that they're only 10 minutes long, so this is, you know, a lot more of a stretched out version of it. A lot more fluffy. And of course, since he won the fight, this is a lot more of a positive spin on it. So no adversity even really in this episode. It rang a little bit hollow to me.
I also agree that this episode did not have much to care about. I mean, this was fine. It was just another chink in the armor kind of deal. But the Conor McGregor stories, we already know what we wanted to see here. Nobody gave a fuck about the Cerrone shit. We wanted to see the Habib. We wanted to see the Diaz. We wanted to see the Poirier. Floyd, maybe. But like this right here, this episode, I don't know, guys, not really that crazy. And then they took out the portions of the first episode that I liked, where Connor was, he's that divine intervention type of deal. Like, obviously, you can't have that every camp, but the thing that I actually think that spoke to that, there was one line about it when it really comes to that, and it's back when he's giving back to the community, and he says, it's the duty of the people who have it made to give back to the others who don't, and I'm like, there it is. That's the Connor that I love to hear, but I don't feel like we got too much of it this episode. The ending of the episode with COVID, I do think is interesting because this shows you, or at least what you're supposed to take away, is that Connor is not here fighting because he wants to sell out arenas. He wants to compete to compete. He would have done it in COVID. He would have done it here. He would have done it there. He would have fought his teammate. Whatever you want to say. Like it truly is just building to the thing. Like Connor really was about this fight shit. He really is.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you mentioned that because, you know, a lot of times, like something like that, and some of the other things that throughout the runtime of these episodes that is more compelling to me is the surrounding elements of his life, and not necessarily him himself, but the circumstances that go into things. You know, how he, the place that he got to when it came to Habib. COVID being such a major portion of how he had to navigate during this time. Those are things that are compelling to me a little bit. So I do think that like you could make an entire documentary about, you know, MMA during COVID would probably be pretty interesting as a one-off by itself. So having Connor as like the focal point to highlight some of these other elements of the timeline at this period of time, I think that there's value to that. Like, I'm not trying to say that this is completely devoid of value altogether or anything like that, but you know, you always have to keep in mind that all of those things that I just mentioned are surrounded by and cloaked in this tremendous glaze fest of Connor isn't he amazing? You know, and look, he is amazing. I'm not going to be sitting here telling you, like, I am the first person, I always have to be this guy to remind everyone that there was a time when Conor McGregor was the greatest mixed martial artist on the planet to a lot of people, and rightly so. So is all of this deserved? I think that there is a basis for it for sure, but I don't like when you only put forth the good with these minor mentions of struggle and not really backfill any of that with like showing us and immersing us in that side of things, because there's so much more to this story that we're not getting.
Yeah, 100%. But that is with a lot of, documentaries, sports documentaries, not just, if you look at, I compared it to Michael Jackson earlier. How many documentaries are not talking about a bunch of stuff that happened there, or they talk about some, they don't talk about the others? I'm not surprised, nor is it like ruining the experience for me that they didn't, talk about the stuff that y- you know, this is just what it is. I appreciate it, but I'm glad that that we just get a narrative that is what it's. I don't know. It feels like it's a story driven narrative. It's not necessarily jumping all over the place, and it's not throwing in like, oh well, this happened, like the court case, of course, with Habib, like that happened and it tied into the story or whatever. If we brought up that other stuff, I feel like we'd have to talk about that stuff instead of the rest of the Conor McGregor story here.
Yeah, but I think that that would be a more interesting informing of like how he's able to keep it all together. You know,
Mm.
that like that's why I would like it. It's not even necessarily just for accuracy's sake. I mean, it certainly is to an extent, but like I think that it also, I mean, like you have a guy who is dealing with this crazy life. It's a very crazy life. We you know, especially for a mixed martial artist, it's a unique, it's an almost wholly unique experience that Connor lives as a mixed martial artist, being at the level that he is at. So that comes with a bigger, broader world than any other fighter that you could ever imagine. So, like, I would like to see how he keeps all of that together, as opposed to just, yeah, struggles happen, but I got to just stay focused on the fighting and, overcome it. Like, it's just, it's a lot of platitudes without a lot of substance at times. But I'm okay with it in the sense that it is well made, it is well presented information, and if you are just going for the version of reality that they are trying to present, it could certainly be worse. They could be omitting more.
The last thing that I would say here, and it's just because I noticed it, this tagline is absolutely horrible for this documentary. At the top, do you see that? Reasonable men never achieve anything. I don't know. It's a little, after what we know, he's a little unreasonable in a couple different areas, but whatever.
I mean, talk about a tagline that was created with the entirety of his life in mind and not shown in its entirety in the show. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
that's a very good connection with what we were just talking about.
But yeah, I am enjoying what we are watching so far. Of course, I enjoyed it the first time. I'm liking it just as much the second time. It is, again, it's not necessarily heavy on the fights. It's not necessarily heavy on one thing or another, but it is a little time capsule. It is a time capsule of what happened with Conor McGregor during this portion of time, in these 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think there is value to what we're doing when it comes to looking at him in this time period, knowing that he has a fight coming up now and, all of the things that happen after this, and kind of taking stock as we, either make our predictions or just, have a more grounded reality as to what we should be expecting out of Connor and his return. So, like I said earlier during the breakdown, if Connor says he has to give it all away to get it all back, this cycle has been repeating time and time again. He's in the low portion of that cycle right now. Could this be where it starts to turn around? We're going to find out when he fights.
We're definitely going to find out, but that is not until we watch the other 2 episodes of this series. So, of course, everybody, make sure to like, make sure to comment, make sure if you want to see the other 2 episodes, we're going to do it anyways, but just make sure to let us know if you want to see it. And we will have that out next week.
That is true. We've got 2 more episodes to round out this mini series, Conor McGregor and his McGregor Forever Netflix special here. So we are going to do just that. Thank you very much for watching this one here. Like Chase said, let us know what you thought about it. Let us know what else you want us to do on MMA on Film. Make sure to like and do all the other YouTube stuff. And we will see you next week for the conclusion. So thank you very much for watching. And of course, this is the actual end. And I saw that we had some good stuff going on in the chat. So thank you
We
very
had some
much, you
bad
guys.
stuff going on in
I
the
know,
chat
yeah.
too.
Jesus Christ, that was interesting thing to come back to. Good Lord, thanks for not making that a thing.
But yes, Carlos, Sam, Tyler Betts, of course, and Quill and Sal could stay on number 3. Appreciate you. Oh, Sanjay too. Appreciate you guys.
absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us for this one. We appreciate it. Obviously, you guys know that for MMA on Film, we aren't able to interact with you guys as much, but know that you are always appreciated, and we still see you either way. So thank you for that very much.
And as always, we are not the best, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys when it comes to taking in recommendations for film for MMA on Film. We are not the best, but we are committed to one day getting around to them. So if you have any films that are predicated around mixed martial arts, there is something about a cage fight in there, let us know and we will add it to the list. And it may just be the next thing we watch because as we're starting to find out, MMA on Film, as much as Conor McGregor's divine intervention is, I mean, guys, these movies come to us, and it's like we have to, the movies, films, documentaries, all these other forms of media, we have to review them at certain times. They all revolve around certain elements, and Conor McGregor fighting this week is just one of those things. And I'm very excited to continue on with this documentary, and then of course the movies and TV shows and all the other options that we have later on in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one thing that we are trying to do with this series as well is to give you a good variety of things. It's not just going to be first run films. It's not just going to be documentaries, right? We want to try to pull from a broad range of things. That's why it was really cool when we were able to do the Smashing Machine documentary and the film and things like that. So, we're trying to vary the content and give you some interesting stuff to sink your teeth into that is stuff that we are interested in as well. So, you let us know what you want. We will certainly consider it. And eventually, I mean, we're in it for the long haul as long as you guys are supporting. So eventually I can almost guarantee that we're going to get to all of the stuff. It's just a matter of time.
Absolutely. And I don't know if anybody knew, but for Carlos's question, I will be seeing you tomorrow when you show up for One Friday Fights in the morning, brother. So
Yes, definitely do that. I'm going to try to hang out for as much of that as I can, but it's something that I'm glad I am able to tell all of you people now is, of course, this should be the very last thing. This stream that we're doing right now should be the last thing that I do on the current computer that I am on. So tomorrow, and however long it takes, is going to be getting the new computer set up and getting ourselves on track for the new era of Yama, which is going to be on the other side of this thing. So, I don't know if you probably can't see it on camera, but I cleaned out everything over here. I've got all of my pre-planning stuff done. So the only thing left to do now is to take this old tower out of commission, put the new one in, get everything all set up on it, and then start using it. So if you do see a little bit of a downtick in the output over the next couple of days, or, if this week was a little bit light, just know that it's not me slacking. It's me getting ready for the next portion of everything here. So Chase will pick up the slack for me tomorrow with One Championship in the morning.
absolutely. And if you guys didn't know, that's youtube.com/@CPSmalls. And Thinker, do you have a place where they can find your content?
Always, brother, youtube.com/@Yama Show. I am at Yama Show on Instagram, Twitter, and on Facebook as well, guys. So we appreciate you guys hanging out with us for this, following, liking, doing all of the YouTube stuff and, all the stuff on the other platforms. And we will be back together for Chase's stream tomorrow morning. So until then, Chase, any last words?
I think the last thing that should be said is that McGregor will be forever.
We're certainly immortalizing McGregor on our two individual channels here. So yes, McGregor forever in our hearts. That's, I guess what I will say, just a little minor sentimental note. We do end up getting kind of connected to these things that we talk about, these films and stuff. Like, when I had seen Bloodsport, a while back or whatever, and I liked it or whatever, but it's like now Bloodsport just comes up in our normal conversation, it's like all these movies just become a little part of our own stories in a way. And so, McGregor becomes part of that too, for better or for worse, perhaps.
It's like we're making a quilt and, like the t-shirts, like these are all of our t-shirts going on the quilt.
There you go. Exactly. And that's a nice thing in the big picture for you and I guess, Chase, and hopefully for all you guys out there who watch and support what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more time, guys, shout out to the chat. You guys are awesome.
Excellent indeed. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us for this one. And we'll see you tomorrow morning for One Championship. So until then, have a great rest of your night, a great rest of your week. And as always, fight on.
Untitled Chapter.